Identity drift reflex. You step into a role, a new job, a relationship, a social expectation, and at first it feels like an act, something external to your true self. But over time, the line between performance and reality blurs. The longer you play this part, the more your core self begins to fade, replaced by the version your brain has updated to fit the role. This is the identity drift reflex, a subtle, almost automatic process where your brain doesn't safeguard a fixed identity, but continuously rewires your sense of self to align with your ongoing behaviors and performances. Think of identity not as a static, unchanging essence, but as a dynamic, malleable construct. Your brain's primary goal is to maintain coherence and predictability, both internally and socially. When you consistently behave in a certain way, whether to meet expectations or survive pressures, neural pathways strengthen, embedding that behavior into your self-concept. Your mind updates your identity map to reduce conflict between who you are and what you do. For example, someone who begins a job acting confident and competent may initially feel like they're faking it. But as weeks and months pass, the brain rewires itself so that confidence becomes genuine. The performance becomes the person. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Neuroplasticity adapts to repeated behaviors, solidifying them as part of identity. However, this reflex can be a double-edged sword. When roles you enact conflict with your deeper values or desires, the identity drift reflex can erode your authentic self. The performance molds you, sometimes in ways you didn't intend or choose. Over time, you might feel disconnected, lost, or hollow, sensing that the person you were has slipped away beneath layers of adaptation. This phenomenon explains why people can feel trapped in roles like caregiver, perfectionist, or people pleaser. The longer these roles are performed, the more they imprint on identity, making change feel daunting. Your brain isn't guarding a fixed core self, but flexibly updating it to fit your lived experience, for better or worse. The reflex also plays a role in social conformity. When you adopt behaviors to fit group norms, your sense of self shifts accordingly. This is why immersion in certain cultures or communities can transform not only behavior, but fundamental aspects of personality and belief. Recognizing the identity drift reflex is crucial for self-awareness and intentional living. It reminds you that identity is not a given, but a process you participate in. By choosing which roles to perform, and for how long, you can steer this drift consciously rather than be swept along unconsciously. Practices like reflection, journaling, and therapy help uncover where your identity has drifted away from your values. They offer tools to realign behaviors with authentic desires, gently rewiring the brain toward a self that feels whole. Importantly, the reflex doesn't doom you to permanent loss of self. Neuroplasticity means identity is always evolving, and with effort, you can create new roles that nourish rather than erode your core. Change is possible because your brain is designed to adapt. In relationships, the identity drift reflex explains how roles like parent, partner, or friend transform you over time. Being mindful of this can help preserve authenticity within these roles, preventing burnout or alienation. Philosophically, this reflex challenges the idea of a fixed, unchanging self. Instead, selfhood is a fluid dance between experience, behavior, and neural wiring, a process rather than a product. So, as you navigate life's many roles, ask yourself, which parts of me have drifted through performance? What roles am I embodying now, and do they align with who I want to be? How can I consciously shape the ongoing update of my identity? The identity drift reflex invites you to see yourself as a work in progress, shaped by what you do as much as who you feel you are. Embracing this fluidity opens doors to growth, healing, and authentic transformation. Phantom self-recognition. You sometimes recognize yourself in strangers, not because you look alike, but because your mind is seeking lost versions of who you used to be. This phenomenon, subtle yet deeply evocative, reveals the restless nature of identity and memory. The face of another becomes a mirror not of physical similarity, but of fragments of the self that have faded, fractured, or evolved over time. Our sense of self is not fixed. It is a constantly shifting mosaic of past experiences, emotions, and memories. As we move through life, parts of who we were, the innocence of youth, forgotten dreams, abandoned beliefs, recede into the background. These lost selves linger in the recesses of our mind, haunting the edges of consciousness, unresolved and yearning for recognition. When you glimpse a stranger who triggers a flicker of familiarity, your brain is reaching across time, grasping for those missing pieces. This is not mere coincidence or chance resemblance, but a psychological process driven by nostalgia, longing, and the deep human desire for coherence. The mind attempts to reconcile who you are now with who you once were, using external faces as placeholders or symbols for internal fragments. This recognition is intensified when the stranger embodies traits or emotions you once held but have since suppressed or lost. Perhaps their expression, posture, or energy evokes a version of yourself you no longer see daily. The boldness of youth, the vulnerability of early heartbreak, or the hope that once burned brightly. Your mind projects onto this external figure the echoes of your own history, momentarily bridging the gap between past and present selves. Neuroscience suggests that the brain's pattern recognition systems are finely tuned to detect familiarity, not only in faces, but in complex emotional and cognitive patterns. When a stranger's presence resonates with these internal patterns, it triggers an uncanny sense of self-recognition. This process reveals how identity is relational and constructed, influenced by interactions with the world and others. The phantom self-recognition also exposes the fluidity and fragmentation inherent in human consciousness. The self is not a singular, continuous entity, but a collage of moments, roles, and experiences stitched together by memory and narrative. Encountering a stranger who reflects a lost self highlights the gaps and seams in this collage, prompting reflection on what parts of our identity have been left behind or transformed. In literature and art, this motif recurs as a powerful symbol of self-discovery and existential longing. Characters see their own eyes in strangers, feel drawn to unknown faces, or are haunted by doppelgangers, figures representing what has been lost or what might have been. These reflections prompt questions about authenticity, change, and the fragmented nature of human existence. On a psychological level, recognizing yourself in strangers can be a catalyst for healing and integration. It invites you to reclaim or reconcile with parts of yourself that have been neglected, forgotten, or repressed. This encounter is an opportunity to weave lost fragments back into the tapestry of selfhood, fostering wholeness and self-understanding. Yet, this process also carries risks of projection and distortion. The stranger is not you. The recognition is symbolic, not literal. Mistaking the phantom self for reality can lead to confusion or misplaced attachment. Awareness of this subtle distinction is essential for navigating the interplay between external reflection and internal truth. Ultimately, phantom self-recognition reveals the deep ongoing dialogue between who we are, who we were, and who we might become. It underscores the relational nature of identity and the mind's yearning for continuity amid change. In the faces of strangers, we glimpse shadows of ourselves, reminders that selfhood is a journey through time, memory, and connection, always searching, always evolving. Hyperfocus, collapse, trick. Imagine shining a laser pointer in a dark room. The beam cuts through the darkness with intense precision, illuminating one tiny spot, while everything else fades into shadow. This is the essence of the hyperfocus collapse trick. When your mind zeroes in so intensely on a single point that your perception warps, pushing aside everything that doesn't serve the spotlight. The brain selectively erases or dims surroundings and thoughts that threaten to distract from the focus, creating a narrow tunnel of awareness that both empowers and limits you. Focus is vital. It allows you to filter vast sensory input, prioritize what matters, and act decisively. But like any tool, when overused or misapplied, focus becomes a trap. The hyperfocus state distorts reality by compressing your perceptual world into a tiny fragment. Your brain essentially prunes information, shutting down peripheral senses and sidelining unrelated thoughts to protect the integrity of the spotlight. This collapse of perception helps in moments demanding intense concentration, solving a complex problem, performing surgery, or executing a precise athletic move. But it also narrows awareness, excluding crucial context, alternative perspectives, or emotional cues. The tunnel vision induced by hyperfocus can blind you to broader patterns or unexpected signals. Neuroscientifically, hyperfocus engages networks responsible for selective attention, such as the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes. These regions amplify relevant stimuli while inhibiting distractions. However, This suppression can become so extreme that the brain actively erases or ignores information deemed irrelevant, even if that information is important for holistic understanding. Consider someone engrossed in work who loses track of time, hunger, or social cues. Their internal spotlight is so strong that it eclipses external reality. While this yields productivity, it risks disconnection and missed opportunities. Emotionally, hyperfocus can amplify anxiety or obsession as the mind ruminates endlessly on the chosen focus, excluding soothing or balancing thoughts. The hyperfocus collapse trick also reveals a paradox about consciousness. While awareness seems to expand through focus, it simultaneously contracts by eliminating peripheral experience. Your conscious world shrinks to a pinpoint, sacrificing richness for clarity. The price of intense clarity is diminished context. This phenomenon plays out in everyday life. In arguments, someone might fixate on a single detail, ignoring the broader message or emotional undertones. In creativity, excessive focus on a problem can stifle imagination by excluding divergent ideas. Even in mindfulness, while concentration is key, over-focusing becomes counterproductive. Philosophically, hyperfocus challenges the notion that attention always brings deeper understanding. Sometimes, awareness requires spaciousness rather than contraction. True insight often arises not from narrowing, but from embracing complexity, allowing diverse inputs to coexist. Breaking the collapse demands balance. Cultivating flexible attention that can zoom in and out preserves both detail and context. Practices like mindful awareness encourage observing focus itself, noticing when it tightens excessively, and gently widening perception. Understanding the hyperfocus collapse trick equips you to harness focus's power without succumbing to its blindness. It invites you to be vigilant about what your mind erases in pursuit of clarity, questioning whether the excluded information might hold vital meaning. Ultimately, this trick reveals a fundamental tension in cognition: the interplay between clarity and context, spotlight and background, intensity and openness. Mastery lies in navigating this tension, choosing when to collapse perception for precision and when to expand it for wholeness. So, when you find yourself lost in intense focus, pause to ask, what is my mind erasing right now? What shadows grow as my spotlight shines? In this question lies the path to richer awareness beyond the collapse, a perception that honors both the brilliance of focus and the vastness of experience. Empathy override instinct. And empathy is often hailed as one of our greatest virtues, the ability to feel deeply for others, to understand their pain, joy, and struggles as if they were our own. It connects us, builds bridges, and creates meaning in a fragmented world. But what happens when empathy becomes a relentless flood, overwhelming the boundaries between yourself and others, when feeling too much for others begins to erode your capacity to feel for yourself? This is the heart of the empathy override instinct, a paradox where the more you absorb the emotions of those around you, the less you exist as a distinct self. Imagine your emotional landscape as a container. Empathy opens the lid, inviting the feelings of others to flow in, enriching your inner world with compassion and understanding. But if that lid stays open too long, the container overflows. Your own feelings get diluted, displaced, or even erased beneath the weight of others' sorrows and needs. You become a vessel filled with everyone else's pain, leaving little room for your own voice, your own heart. This instinct to override self with other is deeply wired. Humans are social creatures, wired for connection and survival through cooperation. Mirror neurons fire, simulating others' emotions within your own brain, fostering empathy automatically. Yet this mechanism has a shadow side. When unchecked, it blurs the boundaries of selfhood, making you vulnerable to emotional exhaustion and identity loss. The empathy override instinct is common among caregivers, therapists, parents, and anyone who lives in service of others' emotional worlds. Their empathy is a lifeline to those they support, but also a double-edged sword that numbs their self-awareness. Absorbing suffering daily, they risk becoming emotional ghosts, present physically but absent from their own inner experience. This numbing is subtle and gradual. It begins with small sacrifices, ignoring personal needs, suppressing feelings deemed selfish, silencing inner pain to remain strong for others. Over time, the emotional reservoir runs dry. You feel disconnected from yourself, hollow, like a shadow drifting through your own life. The more you absorb, the less you exist. Psychologically, this can lead to compassion fatigue and burnout. The emotional overload triggers defense mechanisms, detachment, numbness, irritability, that protect the fragile self, but also deepen the sense of emptiness. Empathy turns from a gift into a burden, a force that drains vitality and blurs identity. Socially, this instinct is reinforced by expectations and norms. Society often praises self-sacrifice and emotional availability, sometimes without recognizing the cost. The strong empath is celebrated but rarely supported. This dynamic traps individuals in a cycle where caring for others comes at the expense of caring for themselves. Breaking free from the empathy override, instinct requires radical self-awareness and boundary setting. You must learn to recognize when empathy becomes an override, when your emotional absorption is drowning your inner life. This awareness is the first act of reclaiming your existence. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential. It means creating emotional space to hold your feelings separately from others. It means practicing self-compassion with the same tenderness you offer externally. It means knowing when to step back, recharge, and protect your emotional container from overflow. Mindfulness and somatic practices can help you reconnect with your body and feelings. They invite you to listen deeply to your own emotional signals rather than getting lost in the tidal wave of others' experiences. Cultivating this inner listening is an act of survival and self-love. Therapeutically, approaches that emphasize balance between empathy and self-preservation teach that true compassion includes care for the self. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Honoring your own emotions and needs enriches your capacity to empathize authentically without losing yourself. Philosophically, the empathy override instinct points to the delicate dance between connection and individuation. Empathy bridges souls, but must not erase boundaries. Identity is not diminished by feeling for others. It is preserved through honoring the self alongside the other. In practice, this means cultivating empathy with discernment. Feeling deeply for others, yes, but also feeling deeply for yourself. Absorbing pain, yes, but also nurturing joy and peace within. The more balanced your emotional ecosystem, the more resilient and present you become. The paradox of the empathy override instinct is also a call to collective responsibility. Communities must support those who give so much of their emotional selves. Systems should recognize the cost of relentless empathy and provide care, rest, and validation. Ultimately, the instinct warns against losing oneself in the sea of otherness. It teaches that your existence matters, your feelings matter, your voice matters. Empathy is not an endless drain, but a powerful current that flows strongest when it respects the shorelines of self. So, when you feel overwhelmed by others' emotions, remember, to truly care, you must first exist fully. The more you absorb, the less you lose yourself. But awareness, boundaries, and self-compassion restore the balance. This is the survival and sacredness of your being. You are not just a mirror reflecting pain, you are a whole world of feeling. Guard your existence fiercely. Love yourself fiercely so that your empathy becomes a source of strength, not disappearance. Silence, reaction loop. Silence can be deafening. When words fail to come, when no one responds, something strange happens inside your mind. The empty space, the silence, does not stay empty. Your brain, craving connection and meaning, begins to fill in the gaps. It projects thoughts, emotions, intentions onto that void, creating an echo chamber where your deepest fears and doubts reverberate. This is the core of the silence reaction loop. Imagine a moment when you reach out, whether in conversation, in vulnerability, or in need, and hear nothing back. That pause stretches longer than expected. Your mind starts to invent reasons, explanations, and judgments. You wonder, are they angry? Disappointed? Disgusted? Did you say something wrong? Suddenly the silence becomes a mirror, reflecting your own insecurities and worst fears. But the cruel twist is that this reflection is not neutral. It amplifies negativity. The silence does not just reflect your thoughts, it distorts them, bending them toward cruelty. Your brain, wired to protect you, assumes the worst to prepare you for potential harm. This defense mechanism, meant to shield, paradoxically wounds by trapping you in a loop of imagined rejection. The loop forms when the silence repeats. Each pause is a prompt for the brain to generate more stories, more what-ifs, and maybes. The imagined voices become louder, more vivid, more convincing. You begin to believe every cruel thing the silence reflects back, that you are unworthy, disliked, invisible. Neuroscience explains this with the brain's prediction machinery. Our minds are prediction engines, constantly forecasting social cues. Silence, as an ambiguous cue, triggers the brain to fill in blanks based on prior experiences, especially painful ones. If you've known neglect or rejection before, silence becomes a trigger for past wounds, making the loop even harder to break. This cycle is not only internal, it shapes behavior. Believing the silence is hostile, you may withdraw further, isolate, or lash out, which in turn can deepen the silence. The social feedback loop tightens, reinforcing feelings of alienation and pain. Breaking the silence reaction. Loop requires awareness and courage. Recognizing that silence is not truth, but a blank canvas your mind paints with old fears is the first step. The silence does not carry meaning on its own. It only acquires the meaning you assign. Practices like mindfulness help create space between silence and reaction, allowing you to observe the arising thoughts without automatically accepting them. Understanding that your brain's negative fill-in is a protective glitch rather than reality can loosen the loop's grip. Communicating openly about silence, asking for clarity, and seeking connection can also disrupt the cycle. Silence becomes less a mirror of cruelty and more a neutral pause, a chance to reset, rather than a verdict on your worth. The silence reaction loop reveals how deeply our minds crave connection, and how absence of response can trigger devastating internal narratives. It exposes the fragile nature of social trust and the power of interpretation. Yet, within this vulnerability lies resilience. To face silence without surrendering to its cruel reflections is an act of strength. To hold space for uncertainty without filling it with fear is freedom. In understanding the silence reaction loop, we learn that silence is not an enemy, but a challenge, a silent test of faith in ourselves and in the unseen voices of kindness, acceptance, and presence that may yet respond. And in that waiting, in that space between sound and quiet, we find the possibility to rewrite the loop, not as a mirror of cruelty, but as a window to compassion. Lucid illusion, implant. Your mind prides itself on clarity, the moments when thoughts feel sharp, logical, and undeniably true. You trust these insights as the bedrock of reality, the solid ground beneath your feet. But what if this very clarity is an illusion? What if your most logical thoughts are, in fact, hallucinations crafted by the mind, and your sense of certainty is just the moment when a carefully woven lie fits perfectly into the puzzle of your experience? This is the essence of the lucid illusion implant, a profound and unsettling phenomenon where your mind implants convincing falsehoods, masking them as lucid truth. Imagine your brain as a storyteller constantly weaving narratives to make sense of the world. Sometimes, gaps in perception or memory compel it to fill in blanks with fabricated details, blending fact and fiction seamlessly. These fabrications can feel more real than reality itself, because they are tailored to fit your expectations, desires, and prior beliefs. The mind's priority is coherence, not accuracy, so a lie that fits perfectly is embraced as truth. Consider optical illusions. Your eyes perceive shapes, colors, or movements that do not exist, yet your brain insists they are real. Similarly, your thoughts can be mental illusions, hallucinations, birthed by neural patterns that misrepresent reality. This mental fabrication is not a sign of weakness, but a survival mechanism, helping you navigate ambiguity with apparent certainty. Philosophically, this challenges the idea of pure objective thought. Your logical conclusions are filtered through subjective lenses shaped by emotion, memory, culture, and biology. When a false thought aligns so well with these lenses, it gains a veneer of lucidity, making it hard to distinguish from genuine insight. This phenomenon can explain cognitive biases and delusions, where strongly held beliefs feel undeniably true despite contradicting evidence. Your mind's clarity is the lie's perfect fit, convincing enough to shape perception and behavior. The line between truth and hallucination blurs in these lucid moments. Awareness of the lucid illusion implant invites humility and curiosity. It encourages you to question even your most confident thoughts, to test assumptions, and to remain open to alternative perspectives. This does not undermine reason, but enriches it by recognizing its limits. Mindfulness and reflective practices help create mental space to observe thoughts without immediate belief. This space reveals how some clear ideas may be implants, mental constructs designed to soothe uncertainty, but not necessarily accurate. In relationships and society, this illusion contributes to misunderstandings and conflicts. People can hold opposing logical views, each convinced of their clarity. Recognizing the possibility of implanted illusions fosters empathy and dialogue rather than rigid certainty. Ultimately, the lucid illusion implant reveals the delicate architecture of consciousness, a realm where clarity and deception entwine. Your mind's genius lies in creating coherent narratives, yet this brilliance can also deceive, wrapping lies in the garb of truth. So, when a thought feels perfectly clear and logical, pause and ask, could this clarity be a lucid illusion? Is this truth, or a well-fitted lie my mind crafted to feel secure? In this questioning lies the path to deeper wisdom, a recognition that lucidity is not infallible, but a window into the mind's creative complexity. This insight doesn't diminish your capacity to know, but invites a dance with uncertainty, a willingness to hold clarity lightly and explore the vast, mysterious terrain between perception and reality. Puzzle piece person trick. You define yourself by how others treat you, so if they leave, your mind panics, trying to guess what shape you were meant to be. This painful dynamic reveals the fragile scaffolding upon which so much of our identity is built. Rather than emerging from an intrinsic core, the self often forms through reflections in the eyes and actions of others. Relationships become mirrors, social roles become molds, and approval becomes the glue holding together a coherent sense of who we are. From early childhood, humans learn to interpret their worth and identity through interactions with caregivers, peers, and society. Every smile, criticism, embrace, or rejection sends signals that shape the mental image of self. These external validations and repudiations create puzzle pieces, fragments of identity that fit into a larger, evolving picture. But what happens when someone essential leaves? The puzzle loses a critical piece, and suddenly, the edges of the self no longer align. The mind, desperate for wholeness, enters a state of panic, scanning memory and imagination to find a missing shape. It tries to fit new pieces, sometimes forcing mismatched parts, attempting to reconstruct a stable image amid loss and uncertainty. This reconstructive process can manifest as anxiety, self-doubt, or identity confusion. Without the confirming presence of others, the boundaries of self feel porous, unstable. The loss exposes how much the sense of being me depends on external echoes rather than internal certainty. Psychologists recognize this as part of the attachment dynamic. Secure attachments provide a stable framework for identity. Incident or disrupted attachments can trigger chronic searching and shifting self-definitions. The puzzle piece metaphor captures the delicate balance between internal self-concept and external relational input. In adult relationships, the departure of a partner, friend, or community can trigger this identity panic. The familiar roles and expectations vanish, leaving a void where self-understanding once thrived. The mind grapples with questions. Who am I without their reflection? What shape do I take when the mold disappears? Healing involves reorienting the self away from dependence on others' treatment and toward internal coherence. It requires building a core identity resilient to social fluctuations, a self recognized and affirmed from within. Mindfulness, therapy, and self-exploration become tools to reclaim agency over the puzzle, to accept missing pieces without losing the whole. Yet, the social nature of humanity means we are always puzzle makers and puzzle finders, creating identity through connection. The trick is to hold this truth lightly, knowing that while others' treatment influences us deeply, it need not define the entirety of who we are. Ultimately, the puzzle piece person trick reveals the tension between our relational roots and the desire for stable selfhood. It challenges us to embrace both connection and autonomy, learning to live as whole, even amid the shifting shapes of loss and belonging. Inner dialogue, hijack. Imagine the voice inside your head, not just any voice, but the relentless echo of someone who once hurt you deeply. This is the inner dialogue hijack, a silent takeover where your mind's self-talk mimics the words, tone, and judgments of the person who wounded you most. The reason is painful, but simple. Hurt carves deeper grooves into your psyche than kindness ever could, leaving behind patterns that replay over and over, shaping how you think about yourself and the world. Your inner voice is supposed to be your ally, a source of guidance, comfort, and encouragement. Yet, when hijacked, it becomes a cruel echo chamber, repeating criticisms, insults, or doubts you once heard. These mental imitations aren't random. They are deeply ingrained, forged in moments of emotional trauma when your brain sought to make sense of pain by internalizing it. Psychologists call this internalization. When someone important causes pain, especially during formative years, your mind absorbs their voice as part of your own. This is why negative feedback from a parent, partner, or authority figure can haunt you for years, long after they're gone. Your inner critic is not originally you. It's a replay of their voice, amplified by the brain's need to understand and anticipate harm. Neurologically, painful experiences create stronger and more lasting neural pathways than positive ones. The brain is wired to prioritize threat and negativity for survival, so painful words etch deeper grooves in your mental landscape. Kindness, while nurturing, leaves softer impressions that are more easily overwritten. This imbalance explains why the voice of hurt dominates your inner dialogue. The hijack affects self-esteem and decision-making profoundly. When your inner voice echoes harsh judgment, you doubt your worth, question your abilities, and anticipate failure. These internal scripts become self-fulfilling prophecies, limiting growth and happiness. Even when kindness surrounds you, the hijacked dialogue can drown it out, reinforcing old wounds. Breaking free requires awareness and intentional work. Recognizing that your critical inner voice is a mimic, not your authentic self, is the first step. You can begin to rewrite these scripts by consciously introducing new, compassionate narratives, words of kindness, understanding, and encouragement that rewire the brain's grooves over time. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, target these hijacked thoughts, helping you challenge and replace negative self-talk. Mindfulness teaches observing the voice without attachment, recognizing it as a pattern rather than truth. This paradox of the inner dialogue, Hijack, reveals how deeply pain shapes identity and cognition. The voice in your head is not inherently you. It is a scar left by those who hurt you. But scars can heal. The mind's plasticity offers hope that, with patience and care, you can reclaim your inner narrative. Imagine your mind as a garden where once the weeds of pain grew unchecked. By planting seeds of kindness and watering them with self-compassion, you gradually transform your inner dialogue into a voice that supports and uplifts rather than wounds and restricts. This journey is not easy, but it is profound. The voice that once echoed harm can become a source of strength, resilience, and love. The inner dialogue. Hijack is a call to reclaim your mind's narrative, to silence the mimicry of pain and speak your own truth with courage and grace. So, next time you hear that harsh voice within, remember, it is not your real voice but a shadow cast by past hurt. You have the power to rewrite the script, to replace echoes of pain with songs of healing. Your inner dialogue can become your greatest ally if you choose to take back the microphone. Joy aversion conditioning. Joy is supposed to be natural, an effortless rise in the chest, a smile, a lightness that floods your being. It feels like freedom, like life unfolding in its most beautiful form. But what if, for you, joy is tinged with fear? What if your brain has learned to associate happiness with danger, punishment, or loss? This is the hidden mechanism behind joy aversion conditioning. When moments of joy are followed by pain, your mind begins to flinch at happiness itself. Imagine a child who laughs freely but is soon scolded or punished for that laughter. The brightness of joy becomes linked with the shadow of reprimand. Over time, the brain weaves this pattern into its neural fabric. Joy becomes a warning signal, not a reward. The anticipation of happiness triggers anxiety instead of celebration. This conditioning is subtle but powerful. It rewires your emotional responses, creating a protective reflex to dampen or avoid joy. The more the brain expects punishment to follow delight, the more it inhibits the very feeling it once sought. Joy becomes a fragile, risky state, one that your nervous system treats with suspicion. Psychologists call this phenomenon affect phobia, or joy avoidance. It is common among people who have experienced trauma, neglect, or inconsistent caregiving. When happiness is unpredictable or unsafe, the mind chooses caution, preferring numbness or dullness to the roller coaster of hope and despair. Neurologically, this involves the amygdala, the brain's fear center, which can hijack emotional processing. If joy is paired with threat, the amygdala triggers protective responses, anxiety, withdrawal, or dissociation. Your nervous system learns to guard against the perceived danger of feeling good. This creates a paradox. The very thing that could heal and nourish you, joy, becomes a source of distress. You might find yourself sabotaging happy moments, doubting pleasure, or feeling undeserving of delight. The more you flinch at joy, the more isolated and stuck you feel. Socially, joy aversion can be misunderstood. Others may see you as gloomy, resistant, or aloof. But beneath this exterior lies a deep survival mechanism. Your mind protects you from vulnerability by keeping happiness at arm's length. Breaking this conditioning is a delicate process. It requires safety, patience, and compassion. You must learn to retrain your brain to associate joy with safety rather than threat. This is not about forcing happiness, but about gently inviting it back, step by step. Mindfulness and somatic therapies can help by tuning you into your body's sensations, helping you distinguish between genuine joy and fear responses. Gradual exposure to pleasurable experiences in safe environments rewires neural pathways, reducing the amygdala's overreaction. Cognitive approaches teach you to challenge beliefs that link joy with punishment. Affirming your worthiness of happiness dismantles the mental barriers to delight. Therapeutic relationships provide corrective emotional experiences, consistent, nurturing encounters that rewrite early conditioning. Philosophically, joy aversion conditioning reveals the complexity of human emotion. Joy is not just a spontaneous feeling, it is shaped by history, context, and safety. Our capacity to embrace happiness depends on the quality of our emotional environments. Yet, within this challenge lies profound hope. Joy can return, not as a fleeting, dangerous spark, but as a steady flame. The brain's plasticity means old patterns can be softened, new associations formed. With awareness and care, joy becomes less threatening and more accessible. In your journey, allow yourself small moments of delight without judgment. Notice how your body and mind respond. Practice staying present with happiness, even if fear arises. Over time, this builds resilience and rewires your emotional landscape. Remember, joy is your birthright, not a trap. The conditioning that taught you to flinch is not your destiny. You can learn to welcome happiness again, to savor lightness without fear, and to reclaim the fullness of life's emotional spectrum. The path from aversion to acceptance is one of courage and gentleness. It is a reclaiming of your capacity to feel alive. So when joy visits, lean into it. Let the warmth seep in. Breathe through the discomfort. Celebrate the quiet victories of returning to happiness. Your nervous system can learn safety and joy. Your heart can remember pleasure without pain. And you can exist fully. Not despite your past conditioning, but because you've met it with bravery and compassion. Collapse, camouflage reflex. Burnout is a silent collapse, a slow unraveling of energy and spirit beneath the surface of everyday life. But the brain has a way of hiding this collapse. It camouflages it, masking the profound exhaustion as something much simpler, much more painful to face: laziness. This is the collapse camouflage reflex, a psychological defense that turns suffering into shame and healing into punishment. When burnout creeps in, the body and mind scream for rest, for care, for withdrawal. Yet the brain, wired to survive and perform, refuses to acknowledge this breakdown as legitimate. Instead, it tells you that you are weak, undisciplined, or lazy. This internal narrative is a disguise, a camouflage that keeps the truth hidden even from yourself. Why does the brain do this? Because admitting burnout is a confrontation with vulnerability, failure, and limits. Realities many of us are conditioned to fear or reject. Laziness, though stigmatized, is a simpler label. It allows the brain to explain collapse without confronting painful truths. But this disguise comes at a cost. Believing you are lazy instead of broken, you punish yourself. You push harder, try longer, expect more. You chase productivity and success while your system crumbles beneath. Rest becomes guilt, and recovery feels like surrender. The collapse camouflage reflex turns exhaustion into self-blame. This reflex also maintains performance at the surface. Masked burnout can allow you to keep going, sometimes for years, while inside, your resources drain silently. The harder you push against the label of laziness, the more exhausted you become. It's a cruel loop of denial and depletion. The psychological impact is profound. Shame and self-criticism erode self-worth. You internalize failure not as a natural limit, but as personal flaw. This deepens isolation as you hide exhaustion behind a mask of effort. Asking for help feels impossible because admitting burnout threatens the very identity you've built. Breaking the collapse, camouflage reflex begins with awareness. Recognizing that what looks like laziness is actually a cry for help, a signal of systemic breakdown, can transform your relationship to yourself. It invites compassion where there was judgment, rest where there was relentless push. Neuroscience supports this shift. Chronic stress and burnout alter brain function, affecting motivation and energy regulation. These changes are physiological, not moral failings. Understanding this rewires the mind to stop punishing and start healing. Healing requires radical permission to rest, to pause, and to grieve lost strength. It means dismantling the stigma around burnout and laziness, seeing them as signs of overwhelm rather than weakness. It means reclaiming your body's right to recovery without guilt. The collapse camouflage reflex is a protective yet deceptive mechanism, one that hides brokenness behind a veil of blame. But in unveiling this camouflage lies freedom. Freedom to honor your limits, to listen deeply to your needs, and to rebuild resilience with kindness. This journey is not linear. The reflex may return, whispering old lies of laziness. But with awareness, each return becomes less powerful, less convincing. You learn to see through the camouflage, to recognize collapse as a natural part of human vulnerability, not a moral failing. In facing the collapse camouflage reflex, you reclaim your humanity. You choose to rest without shame, to heal without punishment, to live with authenticity beyond the masks the brain once wore to protect you. And in that reclamation, burnout no longer hides in shadows, but becomes a catalyst for profound self-care and transformation. Prediction loop paralysis. You imagine failure so vividly, so frequently, that your brain begins to prepare for it more than it does for success. This repetition of negative anticipation creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, a cycle where rehearsal becomes destiny. This is the essence of prediction loop paralysis, a psychological trap that holds you captive in a continuous loop of imagined defeat, shaping your reality before it even unfolds. Your mind is a powerful prediction machine, constantly simulating possible futures to guide your decisions and actions. These mental rehearsals help you prepare, avoid danger, and seize opportunities. However, when the imagination fixates disproportionately on failure, it rewires your brain to prioritize those negative outcomes. Neural pathways associated with fear, anxiety, and avoidance strengthen, while those linked to confidence and risk-taking weaken. Consider someone about to give a public speech who repeatedly envisions stumbling over words, forgetting lines, or being judged harshly. These vivid rehearsals flood their nervous system with stress signals, activating fight or flight responses. As a result, their body and mind become primed for anxiety, making actual failure more likely. Not because of inherent lack of skill, but due to the brain's conditioning through repeated prediction of failure. The loop tightens as each experience of hesitation or perceived setback reinforces the pattern. The brain interprets these moments as validation, deepening the neural circuitry of failure anticipation. This creates paralysis, where fear of failure overwhelms motivation and action, trapping you in inaction or self-sabotage. Breaking free from prediction loop. Paralysis requires intentional rewiring. Visualization techniques that focus on success and positive outcomes can help balance the brain's predictive models. Repeatedly imagining confident, successful performance strengthens pathways that promote courage and resilience. Mindfulness practices increase awareness of negative loops, allowing you to notice when your mind spirals into failure predictions and gently redirect attention. Cognitive behavioral strategies challenge distorted beliefs fueling the paralysis, fostering a more realistic and hopeful mindset. This paralysis also reveals how powerful your inner narrative is. The stories you tell yourself about possible futures don't just shape your feelings, they sculpt the very neural architecture that governs your actions. Imagination is not harmless fantasy. It is a rehearsal stage where destiny is drafted. In relationships, prediction loop paralysis can manifest as fear of rejection or conflict, leading to withdrawal or defensive behaviors that ironically provoke the very outcomes feared. Awareness helps disrupt these cycles, opening space for authentic engagement. Philosophically, this phenomenon challenges simplistic ideas of free will. Your choices are deeply influenced by unconscious anticipations and learned patterns. Freedom involves recognizing these loops and cultivating the capacity to rewrite them consciously. The paradox lies in how the mind's adaptive prediction system, designed for survival, can become a prison. Rehearsing failure is an attempt to protect yourself from harm, but it ultimately limits growth and fulfillment. So, when you catch yourself imagining worst-case scenarios repeatedly, pause and ask, am I preparing for reality or am I rehearsing a self-limiting destiny? Can I envision a different future where success is not only possible but probable? In embracing this awareness, you reclaim agency over your mental rehearsals. You transform imagination from a trap into a tool, one that scripts confidence, courage, and achievement. Prediction loop. Paralysis is not destiny. It is a pattern, a habit of mind that can be broken. Through conscious practice, you can shift the loop, retrain your brain, and step into a future shaped by hope rather than fear. Permission-based action. Delay. You wait for someone else to say it's okay, because your brain confused survival with obedience too many times as a child. This quiet, persistent hesitation that follows you into adulthood is not merely a habit. It is a deeply wired survival strategy, forged in the crucible of early life experience. It shapes how you move through the world, how you make decisions, and how you relate to yourself and others. To understand this permission-based action delay is to unravel layers of psychology, neurobiology, and the lasting echoes of childhood conditioning. From the earliest moments of life, your brain is a vigilant guardian, scanning the environment for safety or threat. As a child, survival depends on attunement to caregivers whose responses determine safety, nourishment, and comfort. When love and acceptance are conditional, when approval must be earned by obedience, the brain learns a critical, often unconscious lesson. Survival requires submission. Obedience becomes synonymous with safety. Resistance risks danger, rejection, or worse. This association is seared into the neural architecture. The brain's limbic system, responsible for processing emotions and fear, links compliance with relief from anxiety. The prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and impulse control, learns to defer initiative until explicit permission is granted. Over time, this creates a pattern where autonomous action is suspended in favor of waiting for a sign, a nod, a word that says, "Go ahead." As you grow, the external authority figure may fade, but the internalized rule remains. The voice that once demanded obedience becomes an inner censor, a mental gatekeeper holding the reins on your choices. This permission-based action delay manifests in moments when you hesitate to speak up, delay pursuing goals, or second-guess your instincts. You wait for validation, reassurance, or permission from others, even when none is forthcoming, because your brain has equated acting without approval with risk. The consequences ripple through life. Opportunities are missed, confidence erodes, and self-trust falters. The constant deferral fosters a sense of powerlessness, as if your own agency lies locked behind a gate controlled by external voices. You may not even realize the source of this inhibition, mistaking it for simple caution or shyness. Psychological research illuminates this dynamic through the lens of attachment theory and developmental trauma. Children raised in environments where love is contingent on obedience often develop anxious or disorganized attachment styles. Their internal world becomes a battleground of fear and longing, where compliance feels safer than authentic expression. The permission-based action delay is a legacy of this early programming. Neuroscience adds further depth. Studies show that chronic stress in childhood alters brain development, especially in regions governing impulse control and emotional regulation. The neural pathways favor inhibition over exploration, reaction over initiation. The brain's survival wiring prioritizes safety over freedom, causing adult behaviors to mirror childhood survival strategies. Consider a real-life example. A talented artist hesitates to share their work, waiting for an expert's approval before showing it to the world. The delay is not laziness or lack of skill, but a deeply embedded survival mechanism, an echo of childhood where expressing oneself without permission risked punishment or neglect. The brain's conditioned reflex to wait for permission overrides creative impulse, Another example is in workplace dynamics, where an employee delays decision-making, fearing reprimand if they act independently. The habit of deferring to authority, cultivated long ago, constrains initiative and growth. The permission-based action delay becomes a silent barrier to personal and professional fulfillment. Healing this pattern requires awareness and intentional effort. Recognizing the origins of your hesitation is the first step toward reclaiming agency. Mindfulness practices help observe the internalized voices without judgment, revealing their conditioned nature. Therapy can provide a safe space to rewire associations, learning that action can coexist with safety and that your voice matters without external sanction. Building self-trust is crucial. Small acts of choosing without waiting, speaking up, making decisions, setting boundaries, gradually reprogram the brain's survival pathways. Over time, the internal gatekeeper loosens its grip, allowing autonomy to bloom. Community and relationships also play vital roles. Supportive environments that affirm your choices without judgment reinforce new neural patterns, counteracting past conditioning. Positive feedback creates fresh associations between initiative and acceptance, breaking the cycle of delay. It is important to acknowledge that the permission-based action delay is not a flaw, but a testament to your resilience. It was a necessary adaptation in a world where obedience meant survival. Reframing it as a protective strategy rather than personal failure cultivates compassion and patience in the journey toward freedom. In essence, waiting for someone else's okay is the echo of a childhood where safety hinged on obedience, but adulthood offers the possibility to rewrite this script. By understanding the deep roots of your hesitation, embracing mindful action, and nurturing self-trust, you can transform permission-based action delay from a chain into a stepping stone toward a life where your choices flow from inner authority, not external permission. The path is neither quick nor easy, but profoundly rewarding. Every moment you act without waiting is a reclaiming of power, a declaration that you are no longer a child bound by survival fears, but an adult capable of authentic, sovereign action. In breaking free from permission-based action delay, you step into your true freedom, the freedom to be, to choose, and to move forward on your own terms. Fake smile entrapment. Imagine wearing a smile so often that it becomes less a reflection of joy and more a mask hiding discomfort beneath. This is the essence of the fake smile entrapment, a paradox where the very act of smiling to conceal pain rewires your brain, creating a dependency on the mask itself. Over time, when you remove the smile, the underlying discomfort surfaces so strongly that your mind craves the mask again, trapping you in a cycle of addiction to your own facade. Smiling is a powerful social signal, often associated with happiness and acceptance. When you smile despite feeling pain, your brain receives conflicting messages. The facial expression says, "all is well," but internal signals say otherwise. To resolve this conflict, the brain adapts by linking the act of smiling with emotional regulation, training itself to rely on the smile to suppress or modulate discomfort. Neuroscience reveals that facial expressions influence emotions through feedback loops. The facial feedback hypothesis suggests that smiling can actually trigger feelings of happiness. But when smiles are forced and frequent, this feedback loop can backfire, leading the brain to associate the absence of the smile with heightened discomfort or vulnerability. Imagine someone in a stressful job who smiles to mask anxiety and exhaustion. Over time, their brain learns that only the smile can keep distress at bay. When alone and the mask drops, feelings of discomfort surge. The person becomes addicted not to external substances, but to the very expression they wear, a mask that protects but also imprisons. Psychologically, this creates tension between authenticity and performance. The fake smile becomes a habitual defense, making it harder to access genuine emotional states. Social expectations reinforce the mask, rewarding smiles and punishing visible discomfort, deepening the entrapment. This paradox also relates to emotional suppression more broadly. Concealing true feelings may provide short-term relief or social ease, but often intensifies internal conflict and stress. The brain's rewiring through repeated masking complicates emotional regulation, making release more difficult. Breaking the fake smile. Entrapment requires conscious awareness and permission to feel without masks. Practices that encourage authentic expression, safe emotional environments, therapy, mindfulness can help retrain the brain, uncoupling the smile from the suppression of discomfort. Over time, allowing yourself to experience emotions openly diminishes the brain's dependence on the mask. Genuine smiles and feelings emerge naturally, replacing forced expressions with authentic presence. This paradox illuminates the complex dance between expression, emotion, and brain plasticity. The smile that once shielded becomes a trap unless met with courage to lower the mask and embrace vulnerability. So, next time you find yourself smiling through discomfort, remember, your brain is learning from you. You have the power to teach it freedom by welcoming truth beneath the mask, one genuine moment at a time. Identity layer fatigue. Your identity feels like a mosaic, a vibrant collection of different selves, masks, and roles you perform throughout the day. At work, you are one version. With friends, another. At home, yet another. Each identity layer is a costume you wear to navigate the world, to fit in, to protect yourself. But beneath these layers, something subtle and dangerous happens. Your real self begins to fade, overwhelmed by the many performances you sustain. This is the core of identity layer fatigue. Imagine a stage where the actor must constantly change costumes, voices, and scripts, never allowed to pause or reveal their true face. With every switch, a little part of the actor's essence is left behind, trapped in the discarded costume. Over time, the accumulation of layers weighs heavily, and the authentic self rots beneath this burden of constant performance. This phenomenon is not merely poetic, it's deeply psychological. Human beings crave authenticity, a coherent sense of self that feels genuine and whole. But modern life demands we fragment our identity endlessly. Social roles, professional expectations, cultural pressures, they all require different versions of you. The cost of this fragmentation is identity fatigue, a deep exhaustion from managing conflicting selves. Examples abound. The corporate employee who smiles professionally but hides anxiety at home. The social media user curating a perfect persona while feeling hollow inside. The caregiver who sacrifices their own needs to sustain others, losing sight of who they truly are. Each layer serves a purpose, but cumulatively, they erode the core self. Psychologists note this as a form of emotional labor. The constant management and suppression of true feelings to meet external demands drain emotional resources. The more roles you perform, the more your real emotions are stifled. Over time, this causes dissociation, a sense of numbness, detachment, or even identity confusion. The rot beneath the costumes manifests in anxiety, depression, and alienation. When the authentic self is denied, the soul withers. People feel lost, disconnected from purpose, trapped inside a hollow shell of performed identities. Breaking free from identity layer fatigue requires courage and self-awareness. It means recognizing the layers you wear and the cost they exact. It calls for carving out spaces where you can be unmasked, unperformed, vulnerable. Authenticity cannot survive in masks, but it thrives in honesty, presence, and acceptance. This journey is deeply challenging. The world demands roles, and survival often depends on performance. Yet, reclaiming your real self means learning to balance these layers without losing your core. It involves setting boundaries, practicing self-compassion, and creating rituals that nurture authenticity. Some find freedom through creative expression, art, writing, music, where masks fall away and raw self emerges. Others seek solitude, mindfulness, or therapy to reconnect with their inner truth. The path differs, but the destination is the same: wholeness beyond fragmentation. The paradox of identity layer fatigue is that while layers protect us, they can also imprison us. The same costumes that shield the soul can suffocate it. The key lies in conscious performance, wearing roles with awareness and letting go when they no longer serve. In embracing this paradox, you find strength to dismantle the heavy armor of multiple selves and rediscover the simplicity of being. Authenticity, though fragile, is resilient when nourished with care and honesty. Your real self is not lost. It waits beneath the layers, quietly yearning to breathe, to live, to be seen. Not as a collection of masks, but as a singular radiant presence. Narrative submission reflex. You crave meaning. The raw chaos of life, with its randomness and unpredictability, unsettles you. To find peace, you unconsciously stitch your experiences into neat stories, fabricating cause and effect where none may truly exist. This is the narrative submission reflex, a powerful psychological impulse to impose order on disorder, to transform chaos into a coherent lie that soothes the restless mind and allows you to sleep at night. From childhood, you learn that life should follow patterns. Actions lead to consequences, beginnings lead to endings, and every event has a reason. When reality defies this logic, your mind refuses to accept ambiguity. Instead, it creates narratives, assigning motives, linking events, and filling gaps with invented explanations. This storytelling reflex is essential for survival. It helps you predict, prepare, and navigate the world. But the reflex has a shadow side. When you fabricate cause and effect to impose order, you risk mistaking fiction for fact. You may blame yourself or others unfairly, create false memories, or hold on to illusions that prevent growth. The comfort of a cohesive story can become a prison, anchoring you to distorted versions of reality. Consider trauma survivors who construct explanations that make sense of suffering. If only I had done this differently, or this happened because of that. These narratives help manage pain, but can also trap them in cycles of guilt or resentment. The reflex bends facts to fit emotional needs, highlighting how narrative submission serves the psyche, not necessarily the truth. Neuroscience shows your brain constantly seeks patterns, even in randomness. This pattern making is adaptive, but prone to errors, seeing faces in clouds, hearing hidden messages, or connecting unrelated events. The narrative submission reflex is this mechanism writ large in the story of your life. This reflex also explains why people cling to conspiracy theories or simplified explanations. When chaos feels unbearable, a constructed narrative, no matter how false, provides psychological shelter. It satisfies the need for control and certainty. Breaking free requires embracing uncertainty and ambiguity. It demands courage to face a world without neat explanations, to tolerate not knowing, and to accept that some events defy narrative logic. Mindfulness practices can cultivate this tolerance by grounding attention in the present moment rather than stories about it. Philosophically, the reflex challenges the notion that life is inherently meaningful. It suggests meaning is often an act of submission, a voluntary surrender to the comfort of story, not an objective truth. Recognizing this opens the possibility of creating meaning consciously rather than inheriting it unconsciously. In relationships, this reflex shapes how you interpret others' actions and intentions. You might craft narratives that justify hurt or explain love, often projecting your own needs and fears. Awareness helps disentangle projection from reality, fostering more authentic connection. Ultimately, the narrative submission reflex is a testament to the human desire for coherence in a disordered world. It reveals how deeply you long for understanding, peace, and identity, even if the price is living with comforting illusions. So, when you find yourself constructing stories to explain life's chaos, pause and ask, is this narrative serving me by offering comfort, or is it obscuring truth? Can I hold space for mystery without rushing to fill it? In that pause lies the possibility of freedom, a liberation from automatic storytelling and a step toward embracing the raw, unfiltered flow of life. The narrative submission reflex invites you to balance the need for meaning with the acceptance of the unknown, crafting stories with awareness rather than submission. Nostalgia contamination effect. You remember past comfort wrong. Your brain paints misery in warm light to trick you into believing you were safe where you weren't. This phenomenon, known as the nostalgia contamination effect, reveals how memory is not a faithful recorder of events, but a creative force that shapes our past to serve present psychological needs. The mind's tendency to soften pain and hardship with comforting hues is a survival mechanism, but it also distorts reality, leaving us tethered to illusions that can hinder growth and healing. Memory is not a fixed snapshot, but a dynamic, reconstructive process. Each time you recall an event, your brain actively rebuilds the experience, blending facts with emotions, expectations, and present states of mind. When it comes to difficult or traumatic periods, this reconstruction often favors emotional relief over accuracy. Your mind overlays the raw edges of pain with a nostalgic glow, recasting hardship as a time of warmth, security, or belonging. Why does this happen? The brain's primary goal is survival, not truth. Emotional pain from past suffering can threaten your sense of safety and well-being in the present. To protect you, memory filters soften harsh realities, promoting psychological stability. By recasting misery as comfort, the brain reduces distress and preserves a coherent, hopeful self-narrative. Consider the example of someone recalling a troubled childhood. Despite neglect or abuse, their memories might emphasize moments of affection or small joys, filtering out the intensity of harm. This softened recollection can feel comforting, a balm against the scars of trauma, yet it also risks trapping the person in a false narrative, where the urgency to heal or change is dulled by the illusion of past safety. Nostalgia. Contamination extends beyond personal trauma. It colors collective memory as well, how societies remember hardships, wars, or losses. Often, narratives emerge that romanticize difficult eras, focusing on camaraderie, simplicity, or purpose, while glossing over suffering. These distorted memories shape identity and values, but can also impede confronting uncomfortable truths necessary for growth. Neuroscientific research sheds light on the mechanisms behind this effect. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex collaborate in memory reconstruction, modulated by the amygdala, which governs emotion. When recalling emotional events, the amygdala influences which details are emphasized or suppressed. Over time, emotional salience can shift, leading to reinterpreted memories that favor emotional comfort over factual accuracy. The dangers of nostalgia contamination lie in its potential to obscure reality and delay healing. If you believe the past was safer or kinder than it truly was, you may resist necessary change, remain attached to harmful patterns, or misjudge present risks. The brain's protective narrative can become a prison, confining you to cycles of denial and avoidance. Awareness is the key to breaking free. Recognizing that memory is malleable and subject to contamination allows you to question nostalgic illusions. Reflective practices, therapy, and journaling can help uncover the complexities of past experiences, balancing compassion for oneself with honest appraisal. Embracing the full spectrum of memory, both light and dark, fosters integration and resilience. Moreover, distinguishing between comforting memories and present realities empowers you to make conscious choices grounded in truth rather than illusion. It enables growth beyond the shadows of a distorted past toward a clearer, more authentic self-understanding. In essence, the nostalgia contamination effect is a double-edged sword. It offers solace by softening pain, but challenges you to seek clarity beyond comforting lies. By acknowledging this tension, you can honor your survival instincts while freeing yourself from the deceptive warmth that nostalgia sometimes casts over misery. Your past may have been painful, but the light you remember does not have to be a veil. It can become a beacon guiding you through healing, illuminating the path from illusion to truth, from false comfort to genuine safety, and ultimately, from memory to mindful presence. Self-scan addiction. Imagine your mind as a vast landscape, constantly under surveillance, not by an external force, but by yourself. You scan every thought, every feeling, every impulse like a vigilant guard on the lookout for danger. Flaws, errors, red flags become targets in your internal threat detection system. This is the reality of self-scan addiction, a compulsive habit of over-monitoring your own mind, where awareness transforms into obsession, and the quest for self-understanding becomes a prison of endless scrutiny. At first, this intense self-monitoring feels like a strength. You believe that by examining your thoughts rigorously, you can catch mistakes before they happen, prevent emotional disasters, and cultivate a pristine inner world. This hyper-awareness seems like the ultimate form of self-care, an intellectual armor against failure and vulnerability. But over time, this armor turns into shackles. The problem lies in the mind's natural tendency to search for patterns and threats. The brain's threat detection system, vital for survival, can misfire inwardly, scanning your own mental activity as if it were an enemy. Thoughts that are perfectly normal, even creative or spontaneous, become suspect. Every hesitation, every doubt, every fleeting negative feeling is flagged as a potential flaw to be corrected or avoided. This internal vigilance creates a feedback loop. The more you scan and detect, the more anxiety you generate, which in turn fuels more scanning. Your mind becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting flaws that grow larger with each glance. The obsession with self-monitoring consumes mental energy, leaving little room for rest or spontaneity. Consider someone who obsessively checks their emotions, analyzing every nuance of mood and reaction. What started as healthy introspection morphs into relentless self-judgment. They might pause conversations repeatedly to assess if their words sounded right, or mentally replay social interactions, dissecting perceived mistakes. This habit erodes confidence and spontaneity, making genuine connection difficult. Neuroscience sheds light on this phenomenon. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive control and self-regulation, can become hyperactive in such states, suppressing more intuitive, automatic processes. While reflection is valuable, excessive control crowds out natural cognition, creativity, and emotional flow. The brain becomes trapped in cycles of overanalysis. Psychologically, self-scan addiction resembles forms of anxiety and obsessive-compulsive behavior, where intrusive thoughts and compulsive checking dominate mental life. But it can also appear in perfectionism and imposter syndrome, where the mind relentlessly hunts for evidence of inadequacy. The paradox is that this intense self-awareness, meant to protect and improve, actually undermines well-being. It breeds doubt, fear, and paralysis. The mind's gaze turns from curiosity to judgment, transforming the inner landscape into a battlefield rather than a sanctuary. This obsession also distorts time perception. Minutes can stretch into hours of mental review, draining energy and distracting from present reality. The compulsion to scan crowds out engagement with the world and others, fostering isolation and disconnection. Breaking free from this cycle requires radical shifts. Awareness of the obsession itself is the first step. Recognizing that scanning the mind incessantly is not neutral, but a compulsive pattern harming you. Mindfulness practices that emphasize non-judgmental observation, rather than critical evaluation, help retrain the brain to notice thoughts without getting entangled. Cognitive behavioral techniques encourage challenging the necessity and accuracy of internal threat detection. Therapy can help dismantle distorted beliefs about perfection and danger in mental processes. Importantly, cultivating self-compassion softens the harsh internal gaze, allowing flaws to be seen as human rather than catastrophic. One powerful approach is to practice letting go, intentionally releasing the need to monitor and control every mental detail. This can be frightening, as vulnerability arises in the absence of vigilant scanning. But through gradual exposure, the mind learns that it can rest without constant surveillance, regaining balance and freedom. This journey is neither quick nor easy. The deeply ingrained habit of self-scan addiction demands patience and kindness toward oneself. Yet, the reward is profound, reclaiming mental space, restoring spontaneity, and rediscovering the mind as a place of creativity and peace rather than fear. The self-scan addiction paradox reveals a universal truth about consciousness. Awareness is a tool, not a master. When wielded excessively, it becomes a trap, turning insight into obsession and care into control. True wisdom lies in balancing attention with acceptance, vigilance with surrender. Imagine your mind no longer as a battlefield, but as a garden, where you observe growth without constant pruning, where imperfections nourish rather than threaten. In this space, awareness is freedom, not fixation. So, when you catch yourself endlessly scanning for flaws and threats within, remember this: your mind does not need to be a vigilant guard forever. You can choose to lower the watchtower, breathe deeply, and invite peace into the inner landscape. The obsession may whisper that scanning is safety, but true safety arises in gentle presence, where awareness becomes liberation rather than captivity. Your journey out of self-scan addiction begins with a single act of kindness toward yourself, a choice to see the mind not as an enemy to be guarded against, but as a companion to be understood and embraced. Ritual grief loop. You re-experience sadness like a well-worn song, one you didn't choose but that plays on a loop in the back of your mind. Certain days, birthdays, anniversaries, or moments marked by songs, become triggers that pull you back into old grief. This is the ritual grief loop, a cycle where your brain bookmarks pain, preserving it to replay again and again as if it were a sacred memory or a lesson never fully learned. When loss or trauma first arrives, the emotions are raw and overwhelming. Over time, your mind attempts to organize and contain this pain. It creates mental bookmarks, markers attached to specific dates, sounds, or places that act like reminders to revisit the grief. These rituals, conscious or unconscious, give shape to something that otherwise feels chaotic and unmanageable. But the brain's bookmarking system is double-edged. While it can provide structure and meaning, it also traps you in cycles of re-experiencing pain. Each time the bookmark triggers, you relive the emotional weight, sometimes more intensely than before. The ritual becomes a loop, a pattern reinforcing itself through repetition. Think about a birthday after the loss of a loved one. Instead of celebration, the day becomes a conduit for sadness, memories flooding back with overwhelming clarity. The brain anticipates this emotional replay and prepares for it, deepening the cycle. Songs, too, can be powerful bookmarks. A melody once associated with loss can ignite waves of sorrow whenever it plays. Your brain links sound and feeling so tightly that hearing the song becomes a portal to the past pain. This loop is not just about memory, but about survival. The brain holds on to grief rituals to honor loss and process emotions gradually. It's a form of emotional containment, a way to keep grief at a distance while still acknowledging it. But the risk is getting stuck in the loop, where healing feels elusive and pain feels perpetual. Neuroscience shows that emotional memories tied to sensory cues are particularly potent. The amygdala and hippocampus work together to encode these memories deeply. Rituals strengthen these neural pathways, making emotional replay more automatic. Breaking the ritual grief loop requires awareness and gentle intervention. Recognizing the bookmarks helps you understand why pain resurfaces predictably. This insight can create space to approach grief differently, not as an endless cycle, but as a passing wave. Therapeutic techniques like narrative therapy encourage rewriting the meaning of grief rituals, transforming them from sources of pain to moments of remembrance or growth. Mindfulness helps you observe the emotions without being overwhelmed, seeing them as transient experiences rather than permanent states. Gradually, you can learn to loosen the grip of ritual pain, opening room for new experiences alongside old memories. Healing isn't about forgetting, but integrating grief into a broader life story that includes joy, meaning, and resilience. The ritual grief loop teaches us about the human need to hold on to loss, to honor what's gone while still moving forward. It is a delicate balance between remembrance and release, between past and present. When you encounter a familiar trigger, a song, a date, a scent, pause and witness the emotions with kindness. Let the brain's bookmark play without resistance, then gently return to the present. In this practice, the loop can shift from a prison to a passage, from repeated pain to profound connection. Your grief is part of your story, marked by rituals that once offered comfort but may now call for transformation. Through awareness, compassion, and time, you can rewrite the loop, making space for healing within remembrance. You are not alone in this journey. Many carry the ritual grief loop, bound by bookmarks of sorrow, but together, through understanding and care, the cycle can be softened, and the heart can find peace beyond the echo of pain. Certainty hunger trap. Your mind craves certainty. It is wired to seek answers, to build narratives that make sense of the chaos around us. But what happens when certainty is impossible? When the truth is unclear or unknowable? The mind does not tolerate this void easily. Instead, it prefers a wrong answer over no answer at all. This is the essence of the certainty hunger trap, a deeply ingrained psychological and neurochemical phenomenon that shapes how we think, feel, and believe. When faced with uncertainty, the brain experiences discomfort. Doubt triggers anxiety and stress responses. It is as if the mind sees ambiguity as a threat, something to be avoided at all costs. Neuroscience reveals that this discomfort is not just metaphorical, it is chemical. The brain punishes doubt by releasing stress hormones, creating a visceral urge to resolve ambiguity quickly. In contrast, false certainty is rewarded. When the mind settles on an answer, any answer, it triggers a flood of dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical. This dopamine release feels like a reward, reinforcing the need to cling to that certainty, regardless of its truthfulness. The sensation is akin to a drug high, making the mind addicted to certainty itself, not necessarily to the accuracy of the belief. This dynamic explains why people often hold on to wrong beliefs with such fierce conviction. It's not just stubbornness or ignorance. It is a neurochemical compulsion to escape the torment of uncertainty. False certainty provides relief, comfort, and a sense of control, even if that control is illusory. Consider examples from everyday life. In heated debates, people may double down on false facts rather than admit doubt. In social media bubbles, certainty, however flawed, is celebrated and shared rapidly, while doubt is marginalized. Politically, ideologies thrive on clear, simple answers, exploiting the brain's hunger for certainty to polarize and control. Even in science and philosophy, the certainty hunger trap manifests. Researchers may cling to favored theories despite contradictory evidence, because admitting uncertainty threatens professional identity and cognitive comfort. The human mind resists the humility of "I don't know" because doubt feels like defeat. This trap has profound implications for free will and intellectual freedom. When the mind's chemical reward system prioritizes certainty over truth, critical thinking is compromised. Genuine inquiry requires tolerating doubt, ambiguity, and complexity, states the brain biologically avoids. Thus, intellectual growth demands conscious effort to override the brain's default reward pathways. Breaking free from the certainty hunger trap is difficult but possible. It starts with awareness, recognizing the biological craving for certainty and its deceptive comforts. Mindfulness and metacognition help by allowing space for doubt without immediate judgment or panic. Cultivating tolerance for uncertainty is an act of courage and discipline. It means embracing the discomfort of not knowing as a pathway to deeper understanding. It means valuing questions over answers, process over outcome. Philosophers like Socrates revered doubt as the beginning of wisdom. Modern neuroscience supports this, showing that the brain's plasticity, the ability to learn and adapt, thrives in states of open inquiry rather than rigid certainty. The certainty hunger trap challenges the illusion of confident knowledge. It reveals that sometimes the mind's loudest convictions are not truths but coping mechanisms, chemical sedatives to silence the storm of doubt. Yet, within this trap lies freedom. Freedom to choose humility over hubris, inquiry over dogma, openness over closed-mindedness, freedom to sit with uncertainty, to explore it without fear. Understanding this paradox deepens our grasp of human cognition. It teaches us that truth is often elusive and discomfort inevitable. But in embracing doubt, we find the true essence of curiosity and growth. The certainty hunger trap is a mirror reflecting our deepest vulnerabilities and strengths. It calls us to awaken from the addiction to false certainty and step into the vast, uncertain expanse of genuine knowledge. And in that vastness lies the possibility of true freedom, the freedom to think, question, and live without the chains of chemical compulsion. Escalation, tolerance, drift. You start small, noticing the tiniest disruptions, the flicker of anxiety at a sharp word, the quickened heartbeat when tension rises. At first, chaos feels unbearable, a storm threatening to shatter your calm. But over time, something shifts. Your tolerance for chaos rises slowly, almost imperceptibly. The storms that once would have broken you become mere background noise, and your survival takes the form of silence. This gradual transformation is what we call escalation tolerance drift, a subtle, profound process where your inner threshold stretches to endure increasing turmoil, but at a hidden cost. Imagine walking into deeper and deeper waters. At first, each step causes panic, cold, overwhelming, threatening to pull you under. Yet, as you wade further, your body adapts. You learn to hold your breath, steady your limbs, and move deliberately. What was once unbearable becomes manageable, but the water keeps rising, and you are forced to keep adapting, to keep drifting into tolerance. You survive by becoming still, silent, and numb, even as the waves crash relentlessly around you. This drift is not simply resilience or strength. It is a coping mechanism born from necessity. When chaos escalates, whether emotional, psychological, or environmental, your nervous system recalibrates. It adjusts its sensitivity downward to prevent overload. This recalibration is protective, but it can also dull your emotional responsiveness. The price of survival becomes a muted inner life. Consider people living in prolonged trauma, war zones, abusive relationships, or chronic stress. They often describe feeling numb or disconnected. Their tolerance for chaos has drifted to such extremes that crises that should evoke alarm instead pass with quiet endurance. Survival here is silence, a quiet surrender of the voice that might protest or cry out. This phenomenon explains why some survivors appear outwardly calm amid chaos, their stillness mistaken for peace. Beneath that calm lies a complex neural adaptation, a nervous system trained to survive by dampening responses. But this silence can mask deep suffering, isolation, and loss of self-expression. Neuroscience shows that chronic stress affects brain areas responsible for emotion regulation, such as the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. These changes support the escalation tolerance drift by blunting reactivity but may impair emotional flexibility and processing. The nervous system's shift into this survival mode is both a blessing and a burden. In daily life, this drift can show up subtly. You might notice feeling numb to disappointments or indifferent to situations that once stirred strong feelings. You cope by suppressing reactions to avoid overwhelm, but in doing so, you risk losing connection to your desires, boundaries, and joys. Escalation tolerance drift also impacts communication. Silence becomes the default response to conflict or distress, not because you lack thoughts or feelings, but because your system has learned that speaking out invites more chaos than safety. This silence can build walls, distancing you from others and deepening loneliness. Breaking the cycle requires awareness and intentional healing. Therapies like somatic experiencing, and so trauma-informed counseling, and mindfulness help recalibrate the nervous system, restoring sensitivity and emotional presence. Relearning to tolerate safety rather than chaos is a slow, delicate process. Community and relationships play a vital role. Safe spaces where vulnerability is met with empathy encourage the reawakening of voice and emotion. Gradually, the silence that once shielded becomes a space for authentic expression and reconnection. Philosophically, the escalation tolerance drift challenges our definitions of strength and survival. It reveals that endurance is not always visible bravery, but can be a quiet, hidden battle against internal numbing. True healing honors this complexity, embracing both survival and restoration. So, when you find yourself calm in storms that should break you, pause to ask, is this calm a sign of resilience or a signal of silent surrender? What parts of yourself have drifted into silence, and how might you invite them back into voice? The journey out of escalation tolerance drift is a reclaiming of presence, learning to feel fully, speak freely, and engage deeply again. It is a return from survival silence to the vibrant complexity of living. Escalation tolerance drift is both a testament to human adaptability and a call for compassion, to yourself and to those whose calm masks storms inside. Recognizing this paradox opens pathways to healing that honor the profound cost of survival and the courage of reclaiming one's voice. Random reward hijack. Occasional praise triggers more dopamine than constant support. The brain bonds to inconsistency harder than to love. This paradox lies at the heart of many addictive behaviors and complex human relationships, revealing how our neurobiology is wired not simply to seek comfort, but to chase unpredictability and surprise. The phenomenon, known as random reward hijack, exploits the brain's reward system, creating powerful attachments that defy logic and sometimes harm well-being. Dopamine, the brain's chemical messenger for reward and motivation, spikes when we encounter unexpected rewards. This unpredictability ignites the pleasure centers more intensely than steady, predictable reinforcement. The intermittent nature of praise or approval, whether from a partner, boss, friend, or social media likes, creates a potent feedback loop. The brain becomes hooked on the uncertainty, always yearning for the next burst of validation. Think of slot machines, the archetypal example of this principle in action. The random schedule of rewards hooks gamblers, compelling repeated play despite losses. Human relationships can mirror this dynamic. When affection or recognition is inconsistent, it paradoxically deepens emotional dependency. The highs feel more exhilarating precisely because they are unpredictable, while the lows heighten craving for the next positive hit. This hijacking of the brain's reward system helps explain why people sometimes remain trapped in toxic or unstable relationships. The unpredictable praise becomes a powerful lure, overshadowing negative experiences and rational assessments. The brain's wiring for random rewards can override conscious judgment, making it difficult to break free. Psychological studies have documented this effect extensively. Intermittent reinforcement schedules lead to more persistent behaviors than continuous reinforcement. In social contexts, this means sporadic approval or attention can foster stronger bonds, though often unhealthy, than consistent, reliable support. The random reward hijack also sheds light on modern phenomena like social media addiction. The unpredictable nature of notifications, likes, and comments creates a dopamine-driven cycle of checking and engagement. Each unexpected notification triggers a spike of pleasure, encouraging repeated behavior that can become compulsive. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for reclaiming agency. Awareness that inconsistency can hijack your brain helps in recognizing unhealthy patterns. It empowers you to seek relationships and environments that offer genuine, steady support rather than volatile approval. Healing involves retraining the brain's reward pathways, cultivating appreciation for consistency, stability, and authentic connection. Practices like mindfulness and self-compassion help break the grip of craving for unpredictable validation. Building resilience against the lure of random rewards fosters healthier attachments and greater emotional well-being. In essence, the random reward hijack reveals a neurobiological vulnerability woven into human nature. It challenges us to look beyond surface behaviors to the underlying drives shaped by dopamine's powerful influence. By understanding and addressing this hijack, you can move toward relationships and experiences grounded not in fleeting highs, but in enduring, trustworthy love. Improvement-triggered collapse. Imagine the moment you start to improve. Whether it's healing from pain, mastering a skill, or breaking a bad habit, there's hope, progress, and a glimpse of freedom. But then, unexpectedly, something shifts. Your brain intervenes, sabotaging that very improvement. This is the essence of the improvement-triggered collapse, a paradox where progress triggers internal resistance, because the absence of struggle feels unfamiliar and unsafe to your mind. Our brains are wired to prioritize survival and stability over novelty. Change, even positive change, disrupts familiar neural patterns that the brain has grown comfortable with. When you improve, the brain faces a new state it doesn't recognize, a calm, a balance, a lack of struggle. This unfamiliarity can activate deep-seated fear responses. The mind perceives the absence of struggle as a threat to its internal equilibrium and instinctively works to restore what it knows. This phenomenon explains why many people experience setbacks precisely when they start to get better. The initial relief of progress is met with subconscious sabotage, relapses, self-doubt, or behaviors that undermine growth. The brain's resistance is not conscious malice, but an automatic defense against perceived instability. Consider someone overcoming anxiety through therapy. As their symptoms lessen, the brain, accustomed to heightened vigilance, may amplify stress signals or provoke panic to reclaim the old normal. This collapse protects the familiar patterns, even if they caused suffering, because familiar pain feels safer than unknown peace. Neurologically, this involves the brain's homeostatic mechanisms. Neural circuits responsible for emotional regulation strive to maintain baseline states. Sudden shifts toward improvement activate circuits that resist change to preserve homeostasis. This internal tug-of-war between progress and preservation creates the collapse. Psychologically, improvement-triggered collapse relates to the concept of comfort zones. Growth requires stepping into unknown territory, which triggers anxiety and resistance. The brain's preference for comfort can manifest as self-sabotage, making improvement feel precarious. This paradox also touches on identity. Struggle and pain can become intertwined with self-concept. Letting go of hardship threatens identity stability, provoking the brain to sabotage progress to maintain a coherent sense of self. Improvement means rewriting personal narratives, a challenging and destabilizing process. Breaking free from this collapse demands awareness of the paradox. Recognizing that resistance during progress is natural, not failure, is crucial. Patience and self-compassion become essential allies. Strategies like gradual change help ease the brain into new patterns, reducing shock to internal systems. Mindfulness allows observing resistance without judgment, creating space for new experiences. Therapeutic work that addresses identity and belief systems supports integrating improvement into self-concept, reducing sabotage impulses. Understanding the improvement-triggered collapse transforms setbacks from signs of defeat into signals of deep internal work. Each collapse is an invitation to deepen commitment, adjust strategies, and honor the brain's protective but limiting instincts. Imagine your brain as a cautious guardian, wary of unfamiliar peace and calm. With patience and care, you can build trust, guiding it to embrace improvement as safe and worthy. In this paradox lies hope. Progress is not a straight path, but a dynamic dance with your brain's instincts. By navigating the collapse mindfully, you transform sabotage into integration, struggle into stability. So, when you feel progress unraveling, remember, your brain's sabotage is a sign you are changing deeply. Hold steady, nurture the new, and invite your mind to learn that improvement is not a threat, but a new kind of home. Hope recoil instinct. You begin to hope, a flicker of light in the darkness, a fragile seed of possibility, yet almost instantly a whisper rises within your mind, cautioning, don't. This isn't a warning born of protection or wisdom, but a recoil, a reflex seated deep in your brain's memory. It remembers the last time you hoped, the promises made and broken, the pain that followed. This is the hope recoil instinct, a silent, haunting mechanism where every spark of hope triggers an internal resistance born from past disappointment. Hope feels like a gift, a driving force that propels us forward through uncertainty and despair. But the brain, ever vigilant, carries the scars of previous hopes unfulfilled. It stores these memories like cautionary tales, etched into neural circuits that guard against vulnerability. When hope flickers anew, this system activates, not to shield, but to recoil, to brace for the inevitable fall. Imagine the heart eager to believe in change, love, healing, or success. Yet, beneath that eagerness lies a shadow, the remembrance of pain tied to past hopes. The brain, wired to avoid harm, becomes wary. It whispers don't, as a reflex born from survival, from learning the hard way that hope can lead to heartbreak. This instinct can be invisible but pervasive, shaping your emotional landscape. You might catch yourself hesitating to dream, to plan, or to believe in good outcomes. The recoil quiets the voice of possibility before it fully emerges. It's a defense against disappointment, but also a barrier to growth and joy. Neurologically, the amygdala and prefrontal cortex play roles in this process. The amygdala, as the brain's fear center, reacts to emotional memories linked to past pain. The prefrontal cortex modulates this reaction, but when memories of failed hope are strong, the recoil reflex can dominate, dampening optimism. Psychologically, this creates a tension between desire and fear. You want to hope, yet you hold back. The push and pull can lead to emotional paralysis or cynicism, leaving you stuck between yearning and protection. Socially, the hope recoil instinct is reinforced by experienced traits of betrayal, neglect, or trauma. Cultural messages can deepen it, teaching skepticism or warning against vulnerability. Over time, the recoil becomes habitual, a default stance toward hope. Breaking free from this instinct is challenging but possible. It requires acknowledging the recoil without judgment, seeing it as a conditioned response rather than an absolute truth. Awareness allows you to witness the internal don't and choose to move forward despite it. Therapeutic practices like cognitive behavioral therapy help reframe beliefs about hope and disappointment. Mindfulness cultivates presence, allowing you to experience hope's emergence without immediate recoil. Building resilience through small acts of hope and witnessing their outcomes rewires the brain's response. Philosophically, the hope recoil instinct reveals the paradox of human longing, the simultaneous craving for possibility and fear of loss. It invites a compassionate embrace of vulnerability, recognizing that hope's power lies not in guarantees, but in the courage to face uncertainty. In your life, honor the recoil as a guardian born of past pain, but do not let it imprison your heart. Let hope arise, fragile and fierce, and step forward with it. Each time you defy the internal whisper, you retrain the brain's narrative, transforming recoil into readiness, fear into faith. Hope is not reckless, it is radical. It is the choice to open despite scars, to believe despite echoes of don't. The hope recoil instinct is part of your story, but it does not define your future. So when hope stirs, listen to the whisper, then answer with your own voice. Choose to hope, choose to risk, choose to live fully, knowing that within every recoil lies the seed of renewal. Void-seeking mechanism. When you find yourself alone, With silence pressing in from every direction and no external input to anchor your mind, something unsettling begins to stir. The brain, desperate for any stimulus, starts to summon the darkest thoughts, not to torment you, but simply to feel something echo back. This is the void-seeking mechanism, a deeply primal response born from the need to fill emptiness with sensation, even if that sensation is pain or fear. Our minds are wired to seek meaning, connection, and feedback. In the absence of external voices, images, or interactions, the brain's internal world becomes the only source of input. But this internal silence can be deafening. To avoid the abyss of nothingness, the brain reaches into the shadows, pulling forth thoughts and images that jolt the system into awareness. This mechanism can manifest as intrusive thoughts, sudden fears, or haunting memories. They are not random. They are the brain's attempt to generate echoes in the void, to break the unbearable quiet. The darkness summoned is a paradoxical lifeline, painful, yes, but alive, resonant, and undeniable. Imagine sitting alone in a silent room. Minutes pass, then longer. The absence of external stimuli becomes oppressive. The mind begins to spin stories, replay past regrets, or imagine worst-case scenarios. This flood of dark thoughts is the brain's way of creating a feedback loop, something to respond to, something to engage with, even if it is uncomfortable. Neuroscience suggests this is linked to the brain's default mode network, a system active during rest and introspection. When deprived of external input, this network can amplify self-referential thoughts, often veering into negativity. The void, rather than calming, becomes a breeding ground for the mind's darkest echoes. This is why solitude can be both healing and terrifying. It offers a chance for deep reflection, but also exposes us to the raw, unfiltered contents of the psyche. The void-seeking mechanism reminds us that emptiness is rarely neutral. It is charged with the brain's need to feel, to know, to be alive. Understanding this mechanism is vital. It explains why moments of isolation can trigger anxiety, depression, or intrusive thoughts. It is not a sign of weakness, but a fundamental human vulnerability, a biological reflex seeking connection in the absence of others. Breaking the cycle requires intentional engagement. Practices like mindfulness, focused breathing, or gentle distraction can provide alternative inputs to the brain, soothing its hunger for echoes. Creating small rituals of connection, even with oneself, helps replace the dark reverberations with calmer, kinder reflections. The void-seeking mechanism also teaches compassion for those struggling with loneliness and mental distress. The darkness summoned is not a personal failing, but a natural response to deprivation of input. Recognizing this opens pathways to empathy and healing. In the vast silence of being alone, the brain's desperate call for resonance reveals the profound human need for connection, not just with others, but with oneself. To feel heard, even if only in the echo chambers of our own minds. This insight invites us to hold space for silence without fear, to gently witness the dark thoughts summoned by the void, and to cultivate light through intentional presence. The void is not empty. It is a canvas waiting for the brushstrokes of awareness and care. And in that dance with darkness and silence, we find the paradox of human consciousness. A mind that fears emptiness so deeply, it creates echoes from shadow, yearning always to feel something, anything, reverberate back. External validation, dependency. You live in a world that constantly demands proof of your worth, a world where feedback is the currency that sustains your sense of value. Compliments, recognition, likes, approvals, they fuel your belief in yourself. But what happens when that feedback disappears? When silence replaces applause? When validation becomes scarce? Suddenly, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like you're fading. This is the grip of external validation dependency, a profound psychological bind where your sense of self becomes tethered to the responses of others, and without them, you risk dissolving into invisibility. From early childhood, your brain learns to associate approval with safety and belonging. Smiles from caregivers, praise from teachers, attention from peers, all these signals confirm your existence as meaningful and accepted. Validation is not just a social nicety, it's a neurochemical reward that lights up circuits tied to pleasure and motivation. Without it, those pathways dim and your inner confidence wanes. Imagine growing up in a room where voices suddenly stop. No encouragement, no feedback, no recognition. The silence is deafening. You begin to question your presence, your talents, your very right to be. In the absence of external mirrors reflecting your worth, your internal image blurs, and self-doubt seeps in. This dependency can create a fragile self-esteem, always at the mercy of others' opinions. Success feels hollow if unacknowledged. Failure feels catastrophic if unnoticed. You become a chameleon, changing colors to match others' expectations, fearing invisibility more than failure. Social media amplifies this effect exponentially. The endless scroll for likes and comments turns validation into a public spectacle. When the screen stays dark, the silence is not neutral. It's a void that threatens your sense of existence. But this dependency is a double-edged sword. While feedback can uplift, over-reliance on it undermines authentic self-worth. You begin to value the you that others see rather than the you within. This external tether restricts freedom, creativity, and genuine self-expression. Breaking free demands cultivating internal validation, learning to recognize your inherent worth independent of applause. This is no easy task, as the brain craves social affirmation deeply. Practices like self-compassion, mindfulness, and affirmations help rebuild the internal sense of value. Relationships also shift from transactional approval to unconditional acceptance, where your worth is acknowledged without constant proof. This creates a safe foundation to weather silence without fading. Philosophically, the external validation dependency reveals the tension between social beings and autonomous selves. We need connection, yet must cultivate inner roots to stand tall amid silence. So, when the applause fades and silence surrounds you, ask, do I believe in my value because of others' voices or despite their absence? Can I find steady ground within, where silence becomes space for growth, not erasure? In this questioning lies the journey from fading to flourishing, from dependent reflection to self-lit radiance. External validation. Dependency is a challenge, but also an invitation to anchor your worth in the unwavering light of your own being. Kindness-suspicion spiral. You've been hurt before, manipulated, betrayed, and now, when someone shows genuine kindness, your mind doesn't simply relax and accept it as it once might have. Instead, suspicion creeps in, subtle but persistent. This is the kindness-suspicion spiral, a psychological and emotional pattern where safety itself begins to feel like bait, and kindness is no longer a gift, but a potential trap. Understanding this spiral means unraveling the complex interplay between trauma, trust, and the mind's desperate drive to protect itself. When manipulation wounds deeply, it leaves more than scars. It rewires the brain's fundamental approach to relationships. The nervous system becomes hypervigilant, scanning for hidden threats even in moments of apparent safety. Genuine kindness, which once might have been a balm, triggers alarm bells. The mind wonders, what's the catch? Why now? Is this real or another form of control disguised as care? This suspicion is not paranoia. It is a survival mechanism. Past experiences have taught the brain that apparent safety can precede danger. Manipulative relationships often involve cycles where warmth is followed by coldness, love followed by exploitation. The brain's predictive systems adapt by treating kindness as a signal to prepare for betrayal. This creates a spiral. The more you are suspicious, the harder it is to relax and receive kindness, which in turn reinforces the idea that kindness is suspicious. Neurologically, this spiral engages the amygdala, the brain's fear center, which becomes sensitized by trauma. It floods the body with stress hormones at the first hint of vulnerability. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for reasoning and judgment, struggles to override these primal reactions. The result is a conflicted state where part of you wants to trust and connect, but another part screams to protect and retreat. Real-life examples abound. A person recovering from emotional abuse may find themselves doubting a friend's genuine offer of help. Compliments are met with skepticism. Invitations to vulnerability prompt retreat. Even acts of kindness from strangers can provoke unease, because the brain searches for patterns, expecting manipulation where there is none. In intimate relationships, this spiral can cause profound difficulties. Partners who are sincere and supportive may feel rejected or distrusted, leading to confusion and frustration on both sides. The victim of manipulation becomes trapped in a feedback loop, where suspicion undermines healing, and healing is necessary to dissolve suspicion. Psychologically, breaking free from the kindness-suspicion spiral requires deliberate effort and compassion. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing that suspicion is a protective but now outdated response allows space for change. Therapy and safe relationships provide environments where kindness can be experienced without hidden agendas, slowly recalibrating the brain's threat detection systems. Mindfulness practices help by anchoring attention in the present moment, allowing genuine kindness to be observed without immediate judgment. Over time, repeated positive experiences create new neural pathways, replacing fear with trust. This is a gradual process, often marked by setbacks, but essential for reclaiming the ability to receive kindness as it was always meant to be. The spiral also highlights the importance of patience from others. For those offering kindness to someone caught in this pattern, understanding that suspicion is not rejection, but a trauma response can foster empathy and persistence. Genuine kindness is not a quick fix, but a steady presence, a silent promise that safety can be real. Ultimately, the kindness-suspicion spiral is a testament to the resilience and complexity of the human mind. It shows how deeply our survival instincts shape our experience of connection and how trauma can transform gifts into threats. Yet, it also reveals the possibility of healing, the potential to retrain the brain, to reclaim trust, and to open the heart to kindness without fear. Your mind's suspicion is not a flaw, but a scar, a marker of survival. Honoring that scar while gently challenging its hold allows you to step out of the spiral. You begin to see kindness not as bait, but as a bridge, a passage back to safety, to connection, and to the genuine warmth that awaits beyond fear. In embracing this journey, you reclaim the profound truth that kindness is not a weapon, but a refuge. It is a language your soul remembers, waiting patiently for you to listen again. Self-fixation, overdrive. Imagine standing at the edge of your own mind, watching every thought unfold with relentless intensity. You analyze each feeling, dissect every emotion, and scrutinize your mental landscape so thoroughly that you lose touch with the raw experience itself. This is the reality of self-fixation overdrive, a state where thinking about your thoughts becomes so consuming that you forget how to truly feel them. Overanalysis, meant to bring clarity and control, instead morphs into a form of emotional anesthesia, numbing your connection to yourself and the world. Our minds are remarkable in their capacity for reflection. Metacognition, the ability to think about thinking, enables self-awareness, planning, and growth. But when this reflective capacity goes into overdrive, it creates a paradox. The very act of trying to understand your inner world becomes a barrier to experiencing it authentically. Consider someone caught in a spiral of rumination. They dissect every emotional response, questioning why they feel sadness, anxiety, or joy. This constant mental commentary disrupts the natural flow of emotion, turning feelings into abstract concepts rather than lived experiences. The heart's pulse is translated into words before it can be felt. Over time, the mind becomes a cold laboratory, observing but not participating, analyzing but not embracing. Psychologically, this overfixation is linked to anxiety and depression. Rumination intensifies negative mood by keeping attention locked on distress without resolution. It crowds out spontaneous emotional processing, leading to emotional blunting, a dulling of the affective spectrum. The mind's need to control and make sense paradoxically fosters disconnection and numbness. Neurologically, brain imaging studies show that excessive self-focus activates the default mode network, associated with self-referential thought and inward attention. While useful in moderation, persistent activation correlates with decreased activity in regions tied to emotional regulation and external awareness. The brain effectively shields itself from overwhelming feelings by retreating into analytical loops. Everyday life offers vivid examples. Someone grieving a loss might dissect their sorrow endlessly, asking, "Why do I feel this way?" Or, "What does this mean about me?" Instead of moving through grief naturally, they become trapped in mental analysis, stalling healing and deepening numbness. Their feelings become objects of study rather than sensations to be lived. Creativity suffers similarly. Artists or writers fixated on evaluating their own thoughts may inhibit inspiration. The inner critic grows louder, drowning out intuitive emotional expression. The spark of feeling is smothered by the flood of scrutiny. This state also alters interpersonal relationships. When overanalyzing thoughts and feelings, genuine emotional connection falters. The person may struggle to respond authentically, caught in mental loops rather than present engagement. Vulnerability becomes theoretical, experienced in thought but not shared heart to heart. Breaking free from self-fixation. Overdrive is a profound challenge. It demands shifting from a stance of constant observation to one of acceptance and participation. Mindfulness practices cultivate this by encouraging non-judgmental awareness, observing thoughts without clinging or pushing, allowing feelings to arise and pass without interrogation. Therapeutic approaches such as experiential therapy emphasize reconnecting with embodied emotion, moving beyond cognitive appraisal to feeling and expression. Movement, art, or somatic techniques can help dissolve the barrier between thought and feeling, reigniting the emotional flow. Learning to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort is essential. Overanalysis often masks fear of being overwhelmed by raw emotion. By gradually embracing vulnerability, the mind softens its grip on control, inviting fuller emotional experience. Philosophically, self-fixation overdrive highlights the limits of intellectualizing human experience. The richness of life is felt as much as it is thought. When thinking crowds out feeling, existence loses depth and immediacy. Imagine your mind as a theater. In overdrive, you become the critic, director, and audience, endlessly reviewing the performance without ever truly watching it unfold. The challenge is to step out of the control booth and sit among the audience, feeling the play's emotions rather than dissecting them. Ultimately, the paradox of self-fixation overdrive invites you to balance reflection with receptivity. Awareness is a gift, but only when it serves connection, not avoidance. The path to wholeness lies in reclaiming feeling from the anesthesia of overanalysis. So, next time your mind races to analyze every thought and emotion, pause and ask, am I living this feeling or just thinking about it? The journey back to yourself begins with a simple act. Allowing yourself to feel without judgment, embracing the rawness, and remembering that true awareness includes the heart, not just the mind. In this balance, you discover a fuller freedom, a consciousness alive with sensation, insight, and presence. Self-fixation. Overdrive ceases to be a trap and becomes a doorway to authentic being. Control displacement reflex. You feel powerless when the big forces in your life slip beyond your grasp. Uncertainty, chaos, loss. In response, your brain seeks refuge in control, but control where it still can, over the small, the minute, the mundane. This is the control displacement reflex, a psychological mechanism where inability to influence large-scale outcomes drives you to micromanage trivial details, creating an illusion of power that slowly tightens into obsession. When facing overwhelming uncertainty, the mind craves stability. It yearns for predictability amid chaos, for certainty in a world that feels arbitrary. But when true control is impossible, the brain redirects its energy to areas where influence feels attainable: the arrangement of objects on a desk, the timing of routines, the exactness of schedules. These small domains become battlegrounds where control is exercised compulsively. This reflex can be adaptive initially, providing a semblance of order and reducing anxiety. Organizing your space or structuring your day can ground you, offering moments of relief. However, as displacement deepens, the boundary between helpful control and rigid obsession blurs. The need to govern minutiae becomes relentless, consuming time and energy, and paradoxically increasing feelings of powerlessness. Consider someone unable to change their job or relationship struggles, who obsessively controls household cleaning or exercise routines. The focus on small details offers a distraction and a fleeting sense of mastery. Yet, these actions don't resolve the underlying lack of control, only mask it temporarily. The brain's displaced control becomes a prison, an endless cycle of perfectionism and frustration. Neurologically, this reflex engages the brain's reward and executive function systems. Successfully managing small tasks triggers dopamine release, reinforcing the behavior. The prefrontal cortex amplifies focus on details, sometimes at the expense of broader perspective. Over time, neural pathways strengthen, making micromanagement habitual and difficult to resist. Psychologically, the control displacement reflex is linked to anxiety and trauma. When confronted with uncontrollable stressors, the reflex serves as a defense, an attempt to reclaim agency. Yet, its paradox lies in intensifying distress through rigidity and obsession. Breaking the cycle requires awareness of the reflex and its origins. Mindfulness practices help observe the impulse to control without acting on it compulsively. Developing tolerance for uncertainty and imperfection can reduce the need for displacement. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy challenge distorted beliefs about control and perfectionism. Exposure to unpredictability in safe contexts builds resilience, teaching that discomfort does not equal danger. Philosophically, the control displacement reflex underscores the human struggle with impermanence and unpredictability. It reveals how the quest for control can trap rather than free us, turning survival instincts into obstacles to peace. In your life, notice where you seek control compulsively. Question whether these actions serve true agency or mask deeper helplessness. Practice releasing grip on minutiae to regain focus on what truly matters. The path is not about surrendering all control, but discerning when control is real and when it's a displaced illusion. This discernment frees you from obsession and opens space for authentic empowerment. So, when you catch yourself micromanaging the small because you can't control the big, pause, breathe. Remind yourself that control over all things is impossible, and that your true power lies in acceptance, presence, and choosing where to direct your energy. Thought loop summoning. The mind is a battlefield where control is often an illusion. When you try not to think about something, a fear, a memory, a desire, you inadvertently give it more power. The more you resist, the more space that thought occupies in your neural landscape. This is the paradox of the thought loop summoning, a real and profound cognitive phenomenon where resistance becomes the very invitation that strengthens what you seek to avoid. Our brains are wired in ways that sometimes betray us. The simple act of telling yourself, "Don't think about it," activates the very circuits that sustain that thought. It's as if the mind hears the command and replies, "What is it you want me to focus on?" In this process, the unwanted thought does not diminish. It expands, occupying more mental real estate, more attention, more energy. Imagine trying not to think about a song that got stuck in your head. The harder you try to push it away, the louder it plays. Or consider an anxious person attempting to suppress a fear. The very act of suppression amplifies anxiety, creating a feedback loop. This is no coincidence. Neuroscience reveals that suppression activates brain regions involved in monitoring for the very thoughts being suppressed, ironically making those thoughts more salient. This dynamic is reflected in the psychological concept known as the ironic process theory. When the mind tries to avoid a certain thought, it simultaneously monitors for the presence of that thought to ensure avoidance. This dual process paradoxically keeps the unwanted thought alive and vivid. Resistance, therefore, acts as an invitation. The mind interprets it as a spotlight on the forbidden. The more you push against the thought, the more it feels compelled to assert itself. This can trap individuals in cycles of rumination, obsession, or intrusive thinking, mental loops that are exhausting and debilitating. Consider the example of someone struggling with guilt or shame. Trying to banish these feelings by sheer force often backfires, making them dominate consciousness. Similarly, attempts to suppress cravings and addiction frequently lead to stronger urges. The mind, in its complexity, responds to resistance not with submission, but with heightened alertness, breaking free from the thought loop. Summoning requires a different approach. Instead of resisting, one must learn to observe thoughts without attachment. Mindfulness practices teach this skill, allowing thoughts to arise, acknowledging them, and letting them pass without judgment or engagement. This non-resistance reduces the thought's power, dissipating its hold on neural resources. This approach rewires the brain's response, shifting from reactive suppression to calm acceptance. It transforms the mind from a battleground into a peaceful observer. With practice, the mind no longer amplifies unwanted thoughts through resistance, but learns to let them fade naturally. The thought loop. Summoning also reveals deep truths about human consciousness. It shows how fragile control can be, how attempts to dominate the mind can paradoxically empower what we seek to escape. It reminds us that awareness and acceptance, not force, are the keys to mental freedom. In understanding this phenomenon, we gain compassion for ourselves and others trapped in cycles of obsessive thinking. We recognize that the mind's struggles are not failures, but reflections of intricate neural processes that require gentle handling. The paradox of resistance inviting intrusion teaches us humility about control and encourages us to cultivate patience and presence. Freedom from unwanted thoughts does not come from battling the mind, but from befriending it. Ultimately, the thought loop summoning invites us into a deeper relationship with our own consciousness, a dance of awareness that acknowledges the power of thought while refusing to be ruled by it. It is a journey from reactive resistance to mindful mastery, from invitation of loops to liberation of flow. In this liberation lies the possibility to live with greater peace, clarity, and freedom, beyond the relentless summons of the mind's own making. Trait fusion trick. You are not just who you think you are also, unwittingly, who others believe you to be. The traits people project onto you, whether positive or negative, are like seeds planted in your mind. With enough repetition, these seeds take root, grow, and merge with your self-image. This is the trait fusion trick, a subtle psychological phenomenon where you absorb the qualities others assign to you until the lines between your authentic self and their projections blur, sometimes irrevocably. You become what they believe, even if it's a lie. From early childhood, your identity is shaped not only by your own experiences, but by how caregivers, peers, and society see you. A child repeatedly told they are shy or troublemaker internalizes those labels. These external projections form a mirror that reflects a distorted or incomplete image, but because it is repeated with consistency, the child's brain weaves it into the fabric of self. This fusion operates through complex neural and psychological mechanisms. Humans are wired for social connection. Our brains constantly scan for feedback to understand who we are in the social world. When others project traits onto us, our mirror neurons activate, and we unconsciously mimic and internalize these cues. The repetition reinforces neural pathways, embedding projected traits deep within our self-concept. Consider someone labeled difficult at work. Initially, they may reject this characterization, but repeated feedback, exclusion, or subtle social cues wear down resistance. Gradually, their behavior shifts to match the label, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The trait fusion has taken hold, reshaping identity through external belief rather than internal truth. The trick is especially powerful with negative projections because the human brain prioritizes threat detection and social rejection avoidance. Negative labels often trigger defensive adaptation, altering behavior to minimize conflict or punishment. This can lead to fragmentation, where the person feels split between who they are and who others think they are. Positive projections can be equally potent but more insidious. Being idealized or put on a pedestal creates pressures to conform to that image, suppressing authentic flaws or desires. The fusion can cause anxiety, imposter syndrome, or burnout as the self strains to embody an imposed ideal. Social media magnifies the trait fusion trick. Online personas and comments create echo chambers of projection, reinforcing narrow or exaggerated traits. The constant visibility and feedback loop deepen the fusion, sometimes making it hard to distinguish the genuine self from the curated identity shaped by audience perception. Breaking free from this fusion requires awareness and intentional deconstruction of internalized projections. Therapy, journaling, and reflective practices help identify which traits belong authentically and which are borrowed or imposed. Reclaiming voice and boundaries is crucial, learning to say no to projections and yes to your truth. Mindfulness strengthens the observer within, enabling you to notice when you act from fused traits rather than core values. This creates space to choose responses consciously instead of unconsciously embodying others' beliefs. Relationships matter deeply here. Supportive environments that affirm your authentic self counteract the fusion, while toxic or controlling relationships intensify it. Healing often involves renegotiating these social dynamics or creating new, healthier connections. Philosophically, the trait fusion trick challenges the idea of a stable, autonomous self. Identity emerges as a social construct, fluid and interdependent. Recognizing this paradox opens possibilities for self-definition beyond imposed narratives. Yet, fusion does not erase agency. You are not helplessly molded by others. Awareness and effort allow you to untangle fused traits, integrate or discard them, and reclaim a cohesive, authentic self. So, When you feel pulled by traits that don't quite fit, ask, which of these come from within and which have been absorbed from others? How have repeated projections shaped the person I see in the mirror? What steps can I take to disentangle projection from essence? The trait fusion trick is a profound reminder that identity is a dynamic interplay between self and society. Navigating this interplay with consciousness is both challenge and liberation, a journey toward authenticity in a world full of mirrors. Expectation, burn-in, loop. If you always expect pain, your brain prepares for it early, blunting joy in advance, numbing life before it even happens. This phenomenon, which we can call the expectation burn-in loop, reveals how powerful the mind's anticipatory mechanisms are in shaping our emotional reality. When pain becomes the default expectation, the brain rewires itself to prioritize survival over pleasure, erecting barriers that dull not only suffering, but also the capacity for happiness. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly scanning the environment for threats and rewards. This predictive nature is crucial for survival. It allows quick responses to danger and helps us seek opportunities. But when the expectation of pain becomes chronic, the brain's threat detection systems become hyperactive, preparing the body and mind for suffering before it arrives. This preemptive defense manifests as heightened anxiety, vigilance, and emotional constriction. The consequence is a paradoxical numbing. By bracing for pain, the brain dampens emotional responsiveness overall. Joy, excitement, and love, all the colors of a vibrant life, are muted. This emotional blunting serves as a protective shield, reducing vulnerability but also limiting the richness of experience. Life becomes a grayscale anticipation of hardship rather than a tapestry woven with moments of pleasure and wonder. This loop can be observed in conditions like chronic stress, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Individuals learn to expect pain because past experiences have reinforced that expectation repeatedly. The brain's circuitry adapts accordingly, increasing baseline stress hormones and altering neurotransmitter systems. Over time, this creates a self-sustaining cycle where anticipation of pain becomes a default mode, hard to break and deeply ingrained. Imagine a person who has faced repeated disappointments or traumas. Their mind begins each day not with openness, but with guardedness, a preloaded script of caution and distress. They may withdraw from social interactions, avoid new experiences, or interpret neutral events as threatening. This behavior further reinforces the loop, as isolation and negative expectations feed each other. Breaking the expectation. Burn-in loop requires conscious intervention. Mindfulness and cognitive therapies help by bringing awareness to these anticipatory patterns, allowing individuals to observe rather than react automatically. Through gradual exposure to safe, positive experiences, the brain can relearn to balance threat detection with reward processing. Neuroscience supports this hopeful view. The brain's plasticity means that, despite entrenched patterns, new neural connections can form. Positive experiences and intentional practices strengthen pathways associated with joy and resilience, slowly dimming the overactive anticipation of pain. The loop also highlights the importance of nurturing environments and relationships. Supportive connections provide a corrective experience, demonstrating that safety and joy are possible. Compassion from others and oneself becomes a balm, weakening the brain's habit of bracing for pain. Ultimately, the expectation burn-in loop teaches that our minds are not passive witnesses, but active architects of emotional life. The stories we tell ourselves about what to expect shape not only how we feel, but what we allow ourselves to experience. Recognizing and transforming these narratives opens the door to fuller, richer living. You don't have to live in the shadow of expected pain. By gently challenging anticipation, embracing uncertainty, and cultivating moments of presence and pleasure, you can break the loop. Joy need not be an afterthought or a fleeting guest. It can become the foundation upon which life is built, vibrant and enduring. In this way, the expectation burn-in loop is both a warning and an invitation, a warning about the costs of living in constant fear of pain, and an invitation to reclaim the fullness of feeling that makes life truly worth living. Blank self-reflex. Imagine entering a room, sensing the subtle currents of expectation, the unspoken rules of who you must be to belong. Instinctively you adjust, tone lowered, opinions softened, gestures restrained. You erase parts of yourself, sculpting a version tailored to fit the space. This is the blank self reflex, a survival mechanism where your personality becomes a canvas, continually edited to match the environment. But after enough edits, a haunting consequence emerges. Your mind forgets who the original self even was. From early in life, we learn that acceptance often depends on conformity. Social animals by nature, humans instinctively adapt to group norms to avoid conflict, rejection, or harm. The blank self reflex operates silently yet powerfully, guiding subtle shifts in behavior and expression that make us blend in seamlessly. At first, these adjustments feel like necessary social navigation, a polite dance. But beneath this adaptation lies a gradual erosion. Each alteration is an erasure, a folding away of genuine traits deemed risky or unwelcome. The original personality, the collection of authentic desires, quirks, and values, begins to fade under layers of compromise. Over time, this leads to a form of self-alienation, where the person you present and the person you feel inside drift further apart. Psychologically, this phenomenon connects with concepts of identity, diffusion, and self-fragmentation. When the self is not allowed to assert consistently, it splinters into multiple facets, each attuned to different social contexts. The mind struggles to integrate these facets into a cohesive whole, resulting in confusion, emptiness, and loss of a stable sense of self. Consider individuals who grow up in highly restrictive or critical environments. To survive emotionally, they learn to suppress authentic impulses, adopting personas designed to placate caregivers or peers. As adults, they may find themselves strangers to their own inner experiences, trapped in cycles of people-pleasing and self-doubt. The blank self-reflex also surfaces in professional and social settings. The pressure to conform to workplace culture or social groups can compel individuals to mute passions, hide vulnerabilities, or mimic expected behaviors. While this may yield short-term acceptance, it breeds long-term dissatisfaction and identity loss. Neurologically, repeated suppression of authentic expression rewires brain pathways. The prefrontal cortex, involved in self-regulation, strengthens control over emotional and impulsive regions, creating habitual inhibition. This neuroplasticity, while adaptive initially, reinforces disconnection from genuine self-awareness. The danger intensifies when the original self becomes so obscured that even introspection fails to retrieve it. The mind experiences a blank state, an absence of stable identity. This void can manifest as depression, anxiety, or a profound sense of numbness. Breaking free from the blank self. Reflex is a complex, courageous journey. It requires reclaiming parts of oneself that have been hidden or discarded. Therapeutic approaches like narrative therapy help individuals reconstruct their life story from authentic threads rather than imposed edits. Practices that encourage self-expression, art, journaling, movement, serve as portals back to original personality aspects. Mindfulness and self-compassion foster acceptance of imperfection and uniqueness, countering the erasing impulse. Socially, creating environments that celebrate diversity and authenticity diminishes the pressure to conform. When people feel safe to reveal their true selves, the reflex weakens, allowing integration and healing. Philosophically, the blank self-reflex challenges notions of identity as fixed or singular. It reveals the self as fluid, relational, and vulnerable to erasure. Yet, it also illuminates resilience, the capacity to rediscover and reclaim authenticity, despite erosion. Imagine your mind as a manuscript. Each social encounter edits and redacts parts of the original text. Over time, the narrative seems lost beneath revisions. The task is to find the erased pages and reread them, piecing together the true story beneath the censorship. Ultimately, this paradox calls for radical honesty with oneself and others. The path to wholeness emerges through embracing and expressing the original self, even when it feels risky or uncomfortable. Authenticity is not perfection, but the courage to exist beyond edits and masks. So, as you move through rooms of expectation and conformity, ask yourself, which parts of me am I erasing? What fragments of my true self await rediscovery? The journey beyond the blank self-reflex is a reclamation of identity, a profound act of self-love and liberation. In reclaiming your authentic voice, you transform from a blank canvas into a vibrant, complex masterpiece. The mind remembers who it was meant to be, not through forced edits, but through fearless expression of comfort-seeking rot. You choose comfort. Not once or twice, but so often that the very idea of challenge becomes foreign, something threatening, even violent. Growth no longer whispers promise, but screams panic. This is the state of comfort-seeking rot, a deep psychological trap where the relentless pursuit of ease erodes resilience and blunts evolution. What begins as self-care morphs into stagnation, where every stretch beyond the familiar triggers fear and true transformation feels impossible. Comfort is seductive. It soothes the nervous system, quiets the mind, and promises safety from pain, uncertainty, and struggle. In a world filled with chaos and demands, seeking comfort is a natural survival strategy. But, like any strategy, when overused or misapplied, it becomes a prison. The paradox of comfort-seeking rot lies in how comfort, meant to sustain life, can slowly suffocate potential. When comfort becomes the default, the brain's alarm systems heighten their sensitivity to discomfort. Challenge is no longer a neutral signal of opportunity, but a perceived threat. Evolutionary impulses that once urged exploration and adaptation now trigger fight-or-flight responses. Growth becomes an enemy. Imagine someone who avoids conflict, new experiences, or difficult emotions so consistently that their world shrinks to a narrow zone of safety. Invitations to change, whether a new job, relationship, or mindset, spark visceral panic. The nervous system resists. Instead of curiosity or hope, there's a surge of anxiety, a craving to retreat. This reaction isn't weakness, but the brain's way of protecting a fragile equilibrium. Neural pathways become habituated to comfort. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, labels challenge as danger, activating stress hormones. Over time, this rewires emotional responses, making growth feel like trauma. Psychologically, comfort-seeking rot fosters learned helplessness. The person believes change is too risky, too painful, or beyond their capacity. Even when dissatisfaction with stagnation grows, the pull of comfort overrides the drive to evolve. This internal conflict breeds despair, frustration, and self-doubt. Socially, this phenomenon is exacerbated by environments that reward conformity and punish risk. Cultural narratives celebrating safety and certainty reinforce avoidance. Technology and consumer culture offer endless streams of comfort, entertainment, convenience, distraction, further dulling the edge of challenge. Breaking free from comfort-seeking rot demands radical courage. It requires shifting the nervous system's threshold for discomfort through incremental exposure. Practices like mindfulness, physical challenges, and creative risk-taking build resilience, teaching the brain that discomfort need not equal threat. Therapeutic approaches address underlying fears, building capacity for tolerance and reframing challenge as growth. Cognitive restructuring helps dismantle beliefs that equate discomfort with violence, fostering a new narrative where evolution is embraced. Philosophically, comfort-seeking rot exposes the tension between safety and growth, survival and thriving. It invites us to reconsider what it means to live fully. Comfort is not enemy, but when it calcifies into rot, it stifles the very essence of life's dynamic nature. In your life, notice where comfort is a refuge and where it is a cage. Observe your reactions to challenge. Are you met with curiosity or panic, compassion or judgment? This awareness is the first step toward transformation. The journey out of comfort-seeking rot is gradual and non-linear. Celebrate small acts of bravery, moments you step into discomfort, however brief. Each choice to grow weakens the panic and expands your capacity for evolution. Remember, growth is not violence, it is a rebirth. It reshapes the self, mind, and body into fuller expressions of being. When you embrace discomfort as ally rather than enemy, comfort transforms from rot into rest, a place of renewal between challenges. So, when panic rises at the prospect of change, breathe into it, then hold space for fear and hope together. Choose to move forward anyway, knowing that evolution waits beyond the veil of comfort's decay. You are not broken by discomfort. You are made whole by your willingness to grow. Comfort-seeking rot is real, but so is your power to rise beyond it, step by step, breath by breath, into the vibrant dance of life. Self-erasure reward trick. From childhood, many of us learn that being quiet, unobtrusive, and kind brings approval. The world rewards those who don't make waves, who fold themselves into the background, who erase parts of their true selves to maintain peace. This is the self-erasure reward trick, a powerful psychological pattern where the brain associates less visibility and lower demands with increased love and acceptance. When you suppress your voice, your desires, your emotions to avoid conflict or burden others, you receive praise. You're so easygoing. You're such a good listener. You never complain. These words become the brain's positive reinforcement. Over time, your nervous system encodes the message. The less you assert your existence, the more you are valued. This reward is subtle but profound. It conditions the brain to prioritize self-erasure over authentic expression. You learn that safety and love come from diminishing yourself. The more you disappear, the more you belong. But this trick comes with a heavy price. As you shrink to fit others' comfort, your true self withers. Your needs, passions, and boundaries are neglected. Authenticity rots beneath the surface of silence and compliance. The brain's reward system, trained to find love in self-effacement, keeps you locked in this cycle. Psychologists recognize this as a form of learned behavior rooted in early relationships. Children who receive love conditionally, only when they are quiet or compliant, grow adults who equate love with invisibility. This shapes identity and behavior, often unconsciously. In social and cultural contexts, the self-erasure reward trick is amplified by norms that value nice and quiet over loud or demanding. It intersects with gender roles, familial expectations, and workplace dynamics. The trick becomes a survival strategy in a world that sometimes punishes presence. But inside this survival lies the cost of invisibility. The brain, craving love, sacrifices the vibrancy of the self. Emotional needs go unmet. Inner turmoil grows. Depression, anxiety, and loneliness often root in this silent erasure. Breaking the self-erasure reward. Trick requires conscious awareness and radical self-compassion. It means recognizing the conditioning and questioning its truth. Is love truly conditional on disappearing? Can you be fully seen and loved exactly as you are? This path demands vulnerability, the courage to speak, to set boundaries, to show emotion, even if it risks discomfort or rejection. It means retraining the brain's reward system to find joy in authentic presence rather than silent compliance. Therapies and practices that nurture self-expression, creative arts, assertiveness training, community connection can rewire the brain toward healthier reward patterns. Mindfulness teaches witnessing without judgment, allowing the self to emerge from erasure. The self-erasure reward trick is both a survival mechanism and a prison. Understanding it opens the door to freedom, freedom to exist fully, loudly, kindly, authentically. Freedom to be loved not for what you hide, but for who you truly are. In reclaiming yourself from this trick, you find the power to rewrite the narrative, to cultivate relationships that honor your whole being, to let your voice rise without fear, to live as a radiant presence, deserving of love in all your complexity. And in that reclamation lies healing, not just of the self, but of the bonds that connect us. For true love is not the reward of self-erasure, but the celebration of self-expression.